Senator Salazar. Representative Henderson.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Stiff.
Here.
Representative Walters.
Here.
Representatives Wanitzer Dave. Co-Chairman Nicholas. Chairman Nethercott.
Here.
Madam Chairman, you have a quorum.
We have a quorum and we're ready to roll. And right in front of us, we have the wonderful Chief Justice of the Wyoming Supreme Court, Justice Kate Fox, and good members of the Joint Appropriations Committee. We are on Agency 101 for your budget packets. Should be noted that this binder is larger than the governor's. No doubt for the extensive work and preparation that has gone into this, which is to be expected from the judicial branch. So good morning, Chief Justice. Welcome, and go ahead and begin your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the Joint Appropriations Committee. Thank you all for your time and attention to these important matters. I note this is only day 2 of a marathon, and I really appreciate your time. I'd like to first make some introductions. Justice Baumgarten is here right behind me. Judge Blumel from the 3rd Judicial District in Kemmerer. Judge Chambers, Circuit Court Judge here in Cheyenne. You know Elisa Butler, our Court Administrator, and Claire Smith, our Chief Fiscal Officer. In a few minutes, I'm going to turn this over to Elisa Butler to go through the budget book, but I'd like to start by giving you an overview of some significant differences in this book. One of the reasons it's bigger, Madam Chair, is because there's more white space, which I think is a good thing, makes it easier to read. It's also organized to illustrate that the work of the administrative office of the courts is in support of the entire branch. It used to look like it was part of the Supreme Court, which in a way it is, it's housed over there, but the majority of its work is to provide the support to our 26 district court judges, 24 circuit court judges in all of your communities. I mentioned some of the key services that we provide or that the administrative office provides in my chief's letter, and Elisa Butler will give you more details. But the issue really is that the Wyoming judicial branch is not just a growing bureaucracy. It's a critical branch of government that is playing catch up after a century or 2 of doing things the same way we did at statehood. So before I became chief, Senator Kinski challenged me to take a hard look at the judicial branch and shake it up, bring it into the 21st century. And I think we have accepted that challenge. We established the Judicial Branch Innovation Task Force made up of judges from each of our conferences, and we hired the National Center for State Courts to provide guidance and information about how courts around the country face the same challenges that we are encountering. We surveyed our judges. We invited various stakeholders to a listening session, and we gathered a great deal of information about how we can better serve the citizens of Wyoming. As a result, we have undertaken a reorganization of judicial branch governance, and we have embarked on a number of projects to better address the needs of our citizens. We adopted a strategic plan to help guide our actions going forward. We are launching a mental health diversion project, which Representative Larson knows a lot about. It will be starting in a couple of weeks in Gillette. We'll be starting a court navigator pilot in Natrona County to assist self-represented litigants to appear in court in a more effective way that helps them and helps the judicial branch. We're providing judges with backup so that they can take a little bit of time off now and then and reduce turnover. We've undertaken a major project, which you've heard about, to classify our employees so that our non-judge employees are on the same metric as other state employees under the Hay methodology. Our e-filing rollout is continuing. I know the lawyers on this committee have experience with it, and I've had nothing but positive feedback. It will be in all the district courts by the end of 2024, and then we'll start on the circuit courts. We're doing a lot, and there's even more that we should be doing. We're still catching up. Now we have complex IT projects. We have federal and state regulatory compliance requirements, an increasing flood of litigants without lawyers, and a prevalence of mental illness and substance abuse. We have added programs that shift our focus from purely legal issues to what I think it was Chairman Nicholas who said, why are you doing social work? We didn't necessarily sign up to do social work, but the truth is that the people in our courts and in the judicial system need a different kind of support than we have traditionally provided. We've done that because that's the reality. Those people are in our courts as a result of mental illness and substance abuse. And whether we like it or not, the criminal justice system has become the primary referral source, the entry point for many people to obtain the treatment that they need. Our traditional approach of finding a person guilty of a criminal offense, locking them up, and then turning them loose with exactly the same mental illness or maybe a worse one doesn't work. It's expensive. I don't need to tell you the cost of incarceration in addition to the burdens on the courts and law enforcement. It puts a great burden on the criminal justice system and gets the poorest possible results. So we therefore have to have the agility to change the way that we respond, and we've been doing that. Our case filings have not increased, but the amount of time it takes to manage every case has multiplied. We also devote many more resources to responding to requests for information. We provide data to many of the executive branch agencies. Students, members of the public, they want to know how the process works, and we should be able to tell them. The citizens need to be informed about the judicial branch and the decisions that we make. We think it's important to maintain the transparency, and for that, we need more people. That is why we've come to you with a budget exception request that's larger than usual. It's $11.5 million in general fund money. The biggest chunk of that, almost $5.5 million, is for non-judge employee pay raises. And the reason we're asking for that is because once we did use the Hay methodology to classify our employees, we learned that they are far below the market pay that other state employees get. And that's not just a question of fairness. We do believe our employees should be paid at the same rate as other state employees. It's a practical reality because we experience higher turnover, and often it's because our employees are going to the state. So we'd like to plug that hole. The next big ask is for $2.5 million to add 10 new positions to the administrative office of the courts. Elisa will tell you more details about those positions, but the big picture is that over the last 20 years, we've added a lot of judges, a lot of court staff, we've added a lot of programs, which I've touched on, and we have not significantly grown that administrative office to support all the kind of work that they've been doing. Elisa probably won't tell you this, but we have a remarkable staff, starting with her. Each of them puts in an extraordinary amount of work. You will not hear in our branch, that's not my job, because everybody does whatever needs to be done. But they're asked too much, and the consequence is two things. One is like a good pack horse. I've used this analogy to some of you before, but you keep loading them up and taking them up the mountain, and no matter how strong their spirit is, they will wear out. we are simply unable to do all the things that we ought to do. And further, when you're working on a shoestring staff, the way it turns out is I see our people are not being put to their highest and best use because highly skilled people are taking out the trash. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't want you to think that we're extravagant. And just for example, I want to talk to you a little bit about Chancery Court. In 2019, the legislature decided we should have a Chancery Court and gave us a pretty tight timeline to get that done. We did it. We set up a committee. I chaired that committee. We had judges and lawyers on it, and a representative or two. We did a lot of work with volunteer people and with the support of the AOC staff. We drafted the rules. We found the location. We picked the decor for the courtroom. All kinds of nitty-gritty work was done, and we got the Chancery Court set up in the legislature's timeline. If you remember, the legislature also appropriated funds for 5 positions for Chancery Court. We didn't use that money. We didn't think we could justify putting a judge in place until the Chancery Court numbers picked up. So our district court judges added the Chancery Court work to their full caseloads. Judge Lavery and Judge Sharp, Judge Fenn, while he was still a judge before he became a justice, all picked up some of that work. And it wasn't actually now, I think our cases have picked up enough to justify a judge, and we will be putting one into place in 2024. But only now that the case filings have reached a critical mass will we be seeking to fill that judge position. And that's just an example of our fiscal responsibility. We are also requesting about $1.5 million for 9 new circuit court clerks. We discovered when we did a workload study that we were down 12 or 13 clerks around the state. And in some areas that need is more critical than others. Here in Laramie County, for instance, is probably the most critical need. Our combined budget request for the 25-26 biennium is about 121 million, constituting only about 3% of the state's general fund budget. We also have a really small request for an inflationary adjustment of about 206,000. I do understand you're spending 2 weeks hearing many impassioned pleas for funding, and this is just one of them. But I appreciate your consideration of the judicial branch. And unless you have any questions, I will turn this over to Elisa Butler.
Questions for the Chief Justice? Senator Guru.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Chief. You were talking about the Chancellery Court and trying to activate one position this year. Where do you kind of give me a sense of where you think that's going in the next 5 years? Or at least in the experience we've had up to date, you know, how is it compared to what you thought it was going to be? And you talked a little bit about that, but just kind of give me a little more on that.
Madam Chair, Senator Guru. Our Chancery Court numbers have picked up slowly but surely since we launched. This is year 3, and we're up to, I think, 30 filings as of yesterday in 2023. We project the same slow increase over the next 5 years. I think a couple things have happened. Attorneys have gotten more accustomed and recognizing that Chancery Court is there, that that's an opportunity to have those business disputes resolved on a really expedited schedule. So they're using it more and more. The other thing that we're hearing is that attorneys have been building in that choice of venue into their contracts so that as contracts ripen and disputes arise from them, there will be more filings in Chancery Court. So we've looked at the evolution of similar courts in other states, and I think we're right on track with that. And we expect a not a big burst of growth, but a slow and steady, the way it has, that's our track record for the last 3 years, and we expect that to continue.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Justice Fox. A couple of questions. On your inflation request, will that come in a letter? I don't see it.
It did, Madam Chair, Representative Larson, we did send a letter.
Okay, then, Madam Chairman, my next question is, I just want to follow up on your comments on the e-filing. I don't know that the clerks of courts share your positive opinion of the system, and we've those of us that have been on this committee for a while have heard that it's going to be done this year and then it goes to the next year. And how confident are you that that will be in place this year? And will it be statewide? And are you comfortable that we have, I mean, so now the clerks of court have to do e-filing, emails, and in person. Are we getting some of that resolved to where some of the angst that we're hearing in our respective legislative districts is being somewhat resolved?
Madam Chair, Representative Larson. Yes, so our e-filing rollout has not been without some hiccups, and we haven't got them all worked out, but we're getting there. We have been fortunate to have a really good working relationship with the elected district court clerks, and they've been very helpful and patient despite the fact that they are dealing with some challenges. One of those challenges, as you mentioned, is that right now, well, we have, I believe, 6 district courts. Is it more now? And the Chancery Court. 9 district courts and the Chancery Court are on e-filing. And they're still allowing email filing, paper filing, and e-filing. Our e-filing committee has just proposed, and this is because of the clerk's request, that we will make e-filing mandatory. I think the plan is, we haven't got the rule in place yet, but that we will do that either 90 days after the rule's in effect or 90 days after e-filing is rolled out in any particular district, and that'll make life a lot easier for the clerks. It will still only be attorneys who can e-file, so there will still be for pro se litigants, they will still be filing paper, but the vast majority of the filings will be by attorneys, and those will be mandatory e-filing, and that's going to help a lot.
Thank you.
Senator Kinsky.
Thank you, Chief Justice. We've certainly gotten a lot done since that cup of coffee we had before you were sworn in. I think that you've been transformative for the court system in Wyoming as a Chief Justice. I think what I'd ask is that it's tempting in your position to say, well, administration of justice, that's lobbying, but when you parse the canon of judicial ethics, clearly administration of justice is foursquare within the permissible concerns of a justice, and there was precedent across the United States. For instance, the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court convened a task force on opioid addiction and what could be done about it. And even though you don't have authority over sheriffs and chiefs and prosecutors, you've got a bully pulpit and a personality that when you call, they come. And you've been pulling people together to really achieve, I believe, a transformation in the administration of justice in Wyoming. And it needs to happen. The U.S. prison system is the largest provider of social services in the United States, remediation of education, alcohol and drug rehabilitation, training for jobs. And the courts are filled with the carnage that's wrought by drugs and alcohol in our justice system, in our society. And I thank you for what you've done and what you continue to do. Now, this is a bold request you've got here, and I told you I don't know that I could support all of it, but I'm going to be listening very closely to hear how much of it that I can support. It's a big ask, but it's a big job, and you've taken it on. And I think what I said is it's kind of hard to ask somebody to take on the job and then deny them the resources to do it properly. So I look forward to learning more as we go through the morning. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senator Kinsky, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for your support and encouragement. I will say that one of the great things that's come out of some of the projects that we've worked on, like the mental health diversion plan, is, and part of this is thanks to Representative Larson, the governor's office, setting the stage for the 3-branch mental health initiative. We have developed some great working relationships with the sheriffs, with the Department of Corrections, Department of Health, because everybody has a part to play in the projects that we're working on. And the Gillette experiment is a great example of that. We've had collaboration from everybody involved in that community, with the county commissioners, the sheriff, the police chief, the prosecutor, the Department of Health. And so that's really an encouraging thing to see, and we can get things done when we get all those people at the table. So thank you.
Further questions from the committee for the Chief Justice? All right, thank you, Chief. Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee, I appreciate your time and attention this morning. My name is Elisa Butler, and I am the State Court Administrator for the Wyoming Judicial Branch. And I have the privilege of presenting the Judicial Branch budget to you this morning. As Chief Justice Fox indicated, the Judicial Branch is adapting to the new normal of the court system in Wyoming, where once the courts were limited to filing legal documents and helping to decide issues presented, courts today must contend with a deluge of self-represented litigants, growing mental health and substance abuse issues in many cases that come through the courts, not just criminal cases, heightened expectations for technological solutions and data, a more litigious and polarized society, and a society that is accustomed to instant access. None of these changes are unique to the judicial branch. Historically, however, the judiciary has been insulated from societal trends. That insulation has all but vanished. In order to fully serve the citizens of Wyoming, the judiciary must alter its approach. The budget I will present to you today is a recognition that to better serve the citizens of Wyoming, the judicial branch must mature and adapt. So the judicial branch budget, just a few things about our budget book, is separated into 3 sections. The Supreme Court budget, which encompasses more than the Supreme Court, quite a bit more. So it has 9 divisions, which includes the circuit courts, the chancery court, the treatment court program, and the AOC, along with a few other pieces within that Supreme Court budget. The district court budget is 26 separate agencies. So the district courts are free of administrative and fiscal control of the Supreme Court. So each of the district court judges has their own budget. The district court budget is approved by the District Court Budget Committee, which is made up of 3 district court judges. We have Judge Blumel, who is a part of that District Court Budget Committee with us today. I believe Judge Rogers will be joining us as well. The Supreme Court budget is approved by the Chief Justice. Our budget does not go through the governor's office. It is approved entirely by the Chief Justice. And the last section is the Board of Law Examiners. That will be presented by Sharon Wilkinson today, who is the Executive Director of the Wyoming State Bar. That section of the budget is also approved by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. There are a few differences that I just wanted to point out between the judicial branch budget and the executive branch budget. The first I just pointed out, which is the governor does not approve our budget before you see it. The second, and I think one of the things that you may be used to seeing, is if you turn to one of your sheets, which is those bright green sheets in your budget book, generally in an executive branch budget, what you would see is one additional column titled Governor's Exception Changes. We don't have that in our judicial branch budget. And the reason for that is because we are small enough to make our decisions about exception requests before they even go into the budget. So the chief doesn't have to do anything extra to approve those. As we move through the budget today, and Madam Chair, with your permission, I'll just start flipping through the book. The first few pages, starting on Romanet 5 are just helpful resources for you. So you'll first see an introduction to the Wyoming Judicial Branch. This explains how the structure of the judicial branch and how we operate. So we have 4 different jurisdictions within the judicial branch. The Supreme Court, who is the arbiter, the final arbiter of all issues of Wyoming law presented in Wyoming. The district courts, who are courts of general jurisdiction, meaning that they have jurisdiction over all cases that are not reserved statutorily to another court. And the circuit courts, who are courts of limited jurisdiction. So our circuit courts here, citation cases, misdemeanors, forcible entry and detainers, eviction cases, protection orders, low level, or when we have a low-level civil case under $50,000, those are heard by the circuit court as well. The Chancery Court, as you heard, is a new jurisdiction of court, and that court is designed to expedite business cases in Wyoming. And so that court is also a court of limited jurisdiction, anything over $50,000 within a set topic area or issue area within the courts. The Romanet 6 provides you just a snapshot of both the judicial branch funding sources and the judicial branch budget and how that's used. So from the funding sources, what you'll see is we are primarily funded by the general fund. 85% of our funding comes from the general fund. But as the chief indicated, that still makes us only about 3% of the general fund budget overall. We have a few other funding sources, including special revenue, federal funds, and then the Tobacco Trust Fund. The judicial branch budget is spent almost entirely, or over 3/4 is spent on salaries. The rest of our budget is spent on support services, granting out to other agencies and entities, and then contractual services. Flipping on to the next page, what you will find is a summary of our branch exception requests. These are all in priority order, 1 through 16, and it provides you the priority, the amount, the source, whether it's an ongoing or a one-time request, the description, and then what page you can find that exception request on. Madam Chair, with your permission, we will go into these much more as we flip through the budget book.
Co-Chair. So I do have a couple questions, particularly on page 4. You talk about the NCSC findings. And in there, you give examples of New Hampshire and Vermont that are twice the size or more than Wyoming, but have caseloads smaller than ours. I mean, more than double the size of ours. And so when I look at those numbers, I'm going, we have to be comparing apples to oranges in terms of what that caseload consists of versus what their caseload consists of. So I'm wondering if you did that analysis. And when I look at your caseload for circuit court judges, 52,000 cases are speeding tickets. And I'm wondering if that's the same thing as what you're comparing to in New Hampshire and Vermont. And then the follow-up to that is, what type of innovative practices have you looked at to reduce that caseload so that speeding tickets aren't counted on the docket for circuit courts except those that go to trial or some component of it, so that it becomes, most speeding tickets ought to be automatic, ought to be an administrative process that it's bing, bing, bing. You never see them, they're not on your dockets. There ought to be some mechanism. And my guess is that's what most other states do. So I'm just, my other question then would also be, what innovative practices do we have on funding sources? What do other states do? If they have additional funding sources, for example, we take numerous fines, we pay that into the school funds. If we modify that type of thing to assist in the financial processes for administrative, for speeding tickets and things like that, it seems to me there are ways that we can come up with alternative sources other than what we have now for covering your business operation costs.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, so With regard to the NCSC study, that was a study done by the National Center for State Courts. I don't know, we did not dig into those numbers. Those were numbers provided by that entity. We can dig in and figure out so it's an apples to apples
Well, to follow
comparison.
up on that, Lisa, how can we use that as a comparator if you haven't even done the homework to know if we're comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges?
Mr. Chairman, and I don't know for sure, but what I would anticipate is those cases are counted somewhere within that caseload because they are cases. Even though they're citations, they're still cases that come through the court, whether they come through as criminal misdemeanor cases as they do in Wyoming, or whether they come through as a traffic case, which they do in other states. So the overall case count, what I suspect is that it is an apples to apples comparison, but we will make sure that we find that out. With regard,
Ms. Butler, can I just interject here on that comment? Because there seems to be a focus on traffic citations and the data of the 50-some thousand. Connecting that back to your budget, their request is for circuit court clerks, an additional, I think, 9 positions for circuit court clerks. Whether the traffic citation is considered a criminal misdemeanor and goes in front of a judge is a totally different analysis. Under any system, a traffic citation has to be touched by a clerk to be received from law enforcement, to go into the court system, to receive the penalty, the fine associated with it. And so that requires administrative work in order to facilitate the completion of that traffic fine. So connecting that back to court clerks and the budget request here, there's a distinction between that function as opposed to the judge's time on the bench and actual litigation time, which certainly could be a traffic case, but probably is not. So I just want to distinguish kind of those functions of the court, which are delineated in the budget request, but may not be so clear when we're looking at hard, raw data of how many people come through the system, either as defendants or traffic citations.
Madam Chairwoman, I would agree completely.
Madam Co-Chair.
Lots of conversation. Senator Salazar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to Romanet 7, can I take that this is the final priority list? Would you make any changes to it?
Madam Chairwoman,
Ms. Butler?
Senator Salazar, I would say that is the final priority order if we get all of those exception requests. If that's not going to happen, what we would request is to reprioritize potentially between those requests.
Senator Kinski?
I wanted to follow up with a suggestion by Co-Chair Nicholas. And I don't know, when he talked about innovative practices to reduce the load, I don't know what he has in mind, but if you've been to judicial conferences or in other states, you've seen practices and thought, well, maybe not. I'd encourage you to bring some of those forward, if not formally, at least informally. And again, I don't know what Co-Chair Nicholas has in mind, but I was impressed. My eldest daughter received a traffic citation in Washington. And with it came a sheet that said, if you have not received a deferral in the last 7 years, and it's a misdemeanor ticket, you can get an automatic deferral, except for certain misdemeanors. Just send this in. And she received, and you don't have another citation within the next 6 months. And that didn't touch any court clerk. And I'll bet that's 90% of traffic citations. People, I mean, there's the repeat offenders, right? But I'm sure most people would probably qualify for a deferral under the program. I'm not advocating it, but I was impressed at the time that somebody was thinking outside the box. Somebody was thinking outside. She was mortified that she got a ticket, 25 years without a ticket. And here she got one, but she was entitled to an automatic deferral. Just check the boxes, send it in, and the computer checked that in fact she's eligible, and boom, now she just has to watch her speed for the next 6 months to be eligible for the deferral. So if there's innovative things, I'd encourage you to, now that would probably be, that would have to be a legislative fix, but I'd encourage you with what Co-Chair Nicholas's suggestion is, let's take a look at it, like the navigator. The navigator, that's thinking out of the box. It's a good idea. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Ms. Butler, and I don't want to spend your time talking about traffic citations here today, and I will remind the committee and you as well, we do have Circuit Court Judge Chambers with us in the back of the room who can maybe potentially provide more insight into how that circuit court process works. So with that, Ms. Butler, please proceed.
Madam Chairwoman and Senator Kinsky, and to the co-chair's question to begin with, our citations, they do get touched by clerks. But there is a process that we use that is quite convenient to people who get those citations, because we have e-citations in a lot of locations throughout the state. So basically e-filing of citations, and there is an online payment portal. So there is a convenience to the citizens when they get a citation, I've used it, a very convenient way to pay for that citation.
I resemble that remark.
I think it looks similar to our parking tickets that we get around the Capitol, the members of the Joint Appropriations Committee. I know you've never received one of those for your service here, and you can go online and pay it, and the pain is over relatively quickly. But a lot of the circuit courts for traffic citations have a similar process. So thank you, Ms. Butler.
And Madam Chairman, with that, I'll go ahead and begin to move through the actual budget, beginning on SC1. So the first agency in your budget book is the Supreme Court agency. Again, that's begins on SC1. The first 9 rows listed on SC1 under the description are the divisions within the Supreme Court budget. What you'll find is most of these divisions serve the entire branch. They don't just serve one jurisdiction of court. There are, this budget also encompasses the circuit courts and the Chancery Court, which are both under the administrative and fiscal control of the Supreme Court, which is why they're included within this agency. So we'll walk through each one of these as we flip through the book. Beginning on SC2, this is the administration division of the Supreme Court budget. What you will find are the units in the administration division, which begins with the administrative office of the courts, and that description begins on SC3. So as the chief mentioned, the administrative office of the courts is the entity that I oversee. We have between 35 and 40 employees right now, and some are vacant. And what we do is we provide support for the entire branch, and that encompasses a number of different areas. So we provide fiscal and HR support, education for our judges, for our clerks, and for the district court clerks. We have a legal resources division, which oversees the law library and provides our office with legal support and legal advice on administrative issues. We have a software applications division, and that is the division that is primarily responsible for all of the court automation applications. So case management system, e-filing, jury management system, e-citations, all of those big projects are housed within the applications division. And then we have an IT division, and that division is responsible for the equipment, so the computers, the printers, courtroom technology, so all of the things within the courtrooms that allow people to join remotely. And then also a big part of what they do is to maintain our cybersecurity and ensure that our judicial branch network is secure. So the administration division, or the administrative office of the courts, really does provide a number of services to the courts and the employees throughout the state, including district court clerks in some instances. And, you know, if you look at the executive branch side, that would be provided by a number of different departments. We have encompassed all of those services within one office within the judicial branch. Flipping to page 4, SC4 of your budget book, what you will find is priority number 2 of our exception request, which is the AOC positions. As the chief mentioned, we are requesting 10 new positions within the administrative office of the courts. We will walk through each one of those today. Madam Chair, though, before I move on, I just want to check and make sure there aren't any questions just about the overall structure of our office.
Representative
Chair.
Larson?
Elise, and I don't know where to ask this question, but as we get into this conversation on pay increases and new positions, I was just curious, as you guys, Justice Fox referenced the Hayes study. And so when you guys, how did you determine the classifications? Did you make that determination internally? Did that go through A&I to see because if I heard you correctly, or if I understood what you said, you were basing you were comparing the classifications to the executive branch, and so there'd be some similarities there. So this administrative assistant would be somewhat comparable to an administrative assistant in the executive branch. So my question is, am I understanding that correct? And then, who made the classifications? And if this isn't the time to answer that, if you just would at the appropriate time.
Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, we are going to get into that a little later in the budget book, but I'm happy to answer it now if you'd like me to.
That's fine. Just throw it out there.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Senator Kinsky?
On page SC4, Ms. Butler, and on the left-hand column, I'd encourage you, I would ask that for follow-up in terms of, I'm puzzled as well, that New Hampshire has double our population, but a smaller caseload. And it says Vermont has a similar population. I don't know whether that's to Wyoming or New Hampshire, but they have 15,000 cases per person per 100,000. We have 25,000. I don't believe the people of Wyoming are that much more litigious. If you could go back to the NCSC and ask them for an explanation as to why that is, I'd be curious. That's really just puzzling to me. And it may be that those cases in those states, maybe a lot of those cases are being resolved in municipal court or some other court, something. I'd like to be able to reconcile that data. Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Kinsky, we can make sure to follow up on that.
Co-chair.
Co-chairman Nicholas?
So I'm wondering if those courts count their district court clerks and staff as part of their, because I'm just trying to think how that could happen. And so once again, I mean, that's just kind of delving into it a little bit. It'd just be interesting to know.
Oh, regrettable to include that footnote. Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Co-Chair Nicholas. So I can tell you a few things. Again, what I would anticipate, whether or not they have a unified court system does not affect the case count. And so we don't count cases generally based on whether or not it comes through a independently elected district court clerk's office or whether it comes through a clerk's office who is part of a unified system. So I don't anticipate that would affect the numbers. The other piece is that the National Center for State Courts, every year, we actually report our caseload to the National Center for State Courts, as do most other states throughout the nation. And they do track information. We are asked to report it in a specific way and count those numbers in a very specific way. We do that annually. I anticipate these numbers came from that annual study, but we will follow up and make sure that that's accurate. So generally, again, what I would anticipate is the case or the way that those are counted are consistent because we are asked to submit that data annually to the National Center for State Courts.
Let's move beyond the footnote. Ms. Butler, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we will start with the first position within the exception budget request. This is a similar priority order. So we have these in priority order right now as far as positions. Again, if this body and the legislature decides that not to grant all of these positions, we would request the opportunity to go back and reprioritize the positions based on need. So the first, as I said, the first position is a grant writer. The grant writer would work to research, write, manage grants, and look for various grant opportunities for the judicial branch and potentially for local communities in terms of things like treatment courts, Most of our treatment courts are in local communities. Many of those are housed within county buildings, and a lot of those positions are not judicial branch positions. So if we could use a grant writer to help treatment courts find more money, we absolutely would do that. There are a number of grant opportunities that we've looked at that we've had to pass up over the years, from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, SAMHSA. We have received a few small grants from the State Justice Institute, which have been wonderful in helping us start some of these new pilots, including the diversion pilot and the court navigator pilot. If we don't get this position now or ever, we really are going to miss out on some grant opportunities. We have talked to other states to determine what kind of grant opportunities they've been able to take advantage of. And there are some large grants out there, especially from BJA. I believe Massachusetts got a $6 million grant over a few years. Illinois got a grant. Again, I think it's a BJA grant, $550,000 each year for 3 years. And then New Mexico got a grant for $5 million over 5 years. These are all.
Chairman?
So in that vein, sorry. Mr. Hibbard in the budget department has been assigned to basically create a grant writing office. And I asked him this morning if the judiciary and that's going to have a position and also a consultant to do the grant writing. I said, does that include the judiciary? So you can start putting together grants for the judiciary as well. And I think his response was absolutely. So the question is, do we need 2 grant writing positions? And would you be willing to work with that new position and consulting firms that he's going to retain if we fund that position?
Ms. Chief Justice?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Co-Chair Nicholas. Reason I want to step up on that is there's a part of me that says, yeah, maybe that would be more efficient. I think we could use a full-time grant writer. And I'm also always cognizant of the separation of powers. I think the judicial branch, I think it's important for us to maintain many of our own functions separate from the legislative and executive branches. So my initial response to your question is, yeah, that doesn't sound right.
Senator Salazar?
May I ask, what do you think, would be forthcoming with your own grant writer? What numbers are we potentially looking at that could help us out on that?
Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Salazar, so in most of the grants that are out there right now do center around mental and behavioral health. And so we have looked into a number of those. They are large grants that take a lot to manage, so we haven't applied for any of them. We have spoken with some, as I said, some other states, and some of them, well, all 3 states that we've talked to are in the millions of dollars. I have also been in touch with a person who works at the State Justice Institute, which is a federal agency that provides small grants to state courts throughout the nation. And she also works within the BJA, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, to help with grants. And in speaking with her, she said they are always looking. They don't generally spend all of that money. And so I think, it's a substantial amount. It's not a small amount. Right now we've gotten, I believe, 4 grants from the State Justice Institute, and all of those have been fairly small, incredibly helpful, but in the $50,000 to $75,000 range.
But Ms. Butler, that amount would justify a position, correct?
Madam Chair, in my mind, yes.
Representative Larson?
So can you hire a firm rather than having a position? Can you identify grants that are available? Are there grant writing firms that you can, contract with to submit those? Or how have you applied for these grants previously?
Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, the grants that we have applied for, we've done internally. Again, they're small grants, so that the management of those is not overly burdensome, although it is just another thing that our staff does. I don't think we would rule out the possibility of contracting that out rather than having a position. Obviously, the preference, I think, would be for a position, but we'd be open. I think what we really want is to be able to take advantage of some of that money.
Ms. Butler, can you speak to the maybe two functions of the position? One would be grant writing, which is doing the grant application to receive the funds, and then managing the grant, and maybe the differences between the two.
Madam Chairwoman, yes, there are distinct differences. So the grant writing is the application is probably something we could absorb in our office if we needed to. We could do the research, we could write it. The management, especially of the larger grants, is a lot more cumbersome. It takes more time. There's a lot of reporting requirements that come with that. And also just somebody to remind us when we have to do it. I can tell you, we have, as I said, those small grants, and Claire has to remind me regularly to write a report. So just keeping track of those grants and making sure that we're meeting our reporting requirements, that is the big lift.
Co-chair.
Co-chairman.
So with the program that we're putting together in the state construction department, it's predicated on the process that it will have to pay for itself, or the grant writing position and dollars go away. So my question then would be, if we approve a grant writing position, then and you have to report each year back to the appropriations, and if it pays for itself, then it will be self-sustaining. If it doesn't, then the program grows away. I mean, is that something you are opposed to, or would you consider that process?
Madam Chairwoman, Co-Chair Nicholas, I don't think we would be opposed. Having a grant writer now is better than not having a grant writer now. So I think that we would be, yeah. I do know that in other states, the grants that they receive do pay for those positions. They are self-sustaining, and they have created positions because they have received those grants. And so, yeah, I think we would be comfortable with that.
Representative Walters?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do a lot of these grants, or many of these grants, have the ability to take an administrative fee off the top to where it would pay for the position, to follow up on the good co-chairman's
Ms.
question?
Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Walters, yes, a lot of the BJA grants do allow for that.
Further questions on the grant writing position? Senator Cruz thinking about it? All right, seeing none, Ms. Butler, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second position is a project manager for software applications. We talked about this quite a bit, and Representative Larson, I know that you have some concerns about how e-filing has gone. And I think it's, overall, it's been good. It's a good step in the right direction. One of the things that would help drastically is having someone who can help manage those projects. We have a number of projects within our software applications division, and those are complex, multi-year, million-dollar projects, millions of dollars. We have the head of our software applications division who is doing all of the project management work. It's too much. It's too much to track all of that, and also to supervise the staff, and also to think high level about the things that we can be doing within the branch to make it better and to automate the branch more. So this position really would be a position to assist with ensuring that vendors are meeting their obligations, that our contracts that our vendors are abiding with the contractual terms, and then also keeping track of all of the tasks that exist under each one of those projects. Even within the e-filing system, there are probably 100 sub-projects within that. So it is a big, big lift. The project manager would help to just track all that, make sure that we're moving things forward and that we're not kind of spinning our wheels. Madam Chairwoman,
Question.
Madam
Representative
Chairman,
Smith.
Madam Chairman, Ms. Butler, on this position 2, project manager for software applications, I certainly agree that managing software contracts is really important and negotiating them is very important because software vendors like to submit contracts that say, we'll charge you $1 million and not promise any level of performance. And if it doesn't work, they'll charge you another $1 million to make it work. And if that doesn't work, so I agree that that kind of negotiating and management is really important. That function is a function that you guys are already doing, I think, right? And you've been doing it pretty well. And it sounds like it's been your job, right? So, I mean, so tell me what your life is, if it is your job, what's your life been like? And is it to the point where you feel like you can't get this function done, without help?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Stith, yes, I do help with vendor management and contract management. A lot of that, the contracts in my previous job, which was general counsel for court administration, I did write the contracts and negotiate the vast majority of them. In my current job, generally, the contracts are written by our legal division, and I review and edit as necessary, which is not very necessary if you've met our legal counsel. But the other thing that I do is when it does become a high level vendor issue, I get involved. So I meet every month with the CEOs of a couple of our vendors, and that is the e-filing system, File and Serve Express, and then also a company called FinVi, which provides our case management system. And so every month we meet. I have had to get involved as some of the issues with our case management have risen to a pretty substantial level, and had to have a lot of conversations with our vendor. It is a lift. It's it's difficult. It would be great if we had somebody who could step in and manage those a little bit better. As I said, I only come in when it becomes bad. And so I would like to prevent it from becoming bad so that it doesn't get to me at all. And so that's where I think we could do better, much better.
Madam Chairman, follow up.
Representative.
Ms. Bell, I do want to say I'm very appreciative of the File and Serve Express system as it's rolling out. It's made my life much better. Things are more efficient in my office. There are fewer disputes about, did something get filed on time? Did it get served? And I really want to thank you for your efforts in doing that.
On behalf of your clients and the people of Wyoming.
On behalf of my clients and the people of the state of Wyoming.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Stith, thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chairwoman, moving on to the third position. This is a software application support position. So this position would provide primarily help desk support to our 342 employees throughout the branch, and then also a level of support to the district court clerks throughout the state as they work with our court automation systems. And so if this position would help us provide more accurate, speedier support to the people who use those software application systems statewide.
Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. With both of these 2 software and IT-related positions, could you remind us your relationship, or the court's relationship rather, with ETS and the ability for ETS to help you in these 2 instances with software management as well as help desk
Ms.
management?
Beller.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Walters, we do collaborate with ETS pretty regularly on a number of different things, rarely on software applications. And the reason for that is 2 things. One is the chief already mentioned, separation of powers issue. But number 2 really is the expertise that it requires to provide help desk support to our courts throughout the state. What we have found is that when we hire these kinds of positions, just to learn the language of the courts is incredibly difficult. What's a pro se litigant? What's a motion for summary judgment? How is that filed? What happens to the money? All of those issues are things that our help desk support has to know. And generally, it takes 6 months to a year for them to just learn the language and learn the process. And so the ability of ETS to help in those kinds of spheres is pretty limited. Where we do work with ETS regularly and reach out in terms of how we can gain cost efficiencies is more on our IT side. So hardware, cybersecurity, anything, if there's enterprise agreements that they have that we can, kind of add on to, that's where we collaborate with ETS a lot more.
Representative Larson?
Lisa, it wouldn't be a fair argument to say that on the ETS side, if you look at state government of whole, I mean, you have some unique language and definitions, but is it any more unique than the Department of Health, the Department of Corrections, the Department of Construction, the Department of Education? I think they all have some uniqueness that they've shown the capacity to adjust to.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, I anticipate that's true. I don't know, and honestly, I don't know the level of how ETS supports those agencies or what they do with those unique software applications. For instance, DFS implementing their system. I don't know what kind of support ETS provides in that regard. So I couldn't speak to that piece of it. But yes, I would imagine that every department in the state of Wyoming has unique language that people need to get accustomed to.
Please proceed.
Madam Chair, the fourth position on our list is an HR coordinator. So our HR office consists of 2 full-time people, and they support 342 personnel within the branch. So that includes things like onboarding, offboarding, payroll, benefits, but it also includes a lot of the higher level functions, which is disciplinary matters, providing assistance to supervisors and learning how to supervise, providing training for clerks and for others who supervise employees throughout the state. What we have found is that often our HR manager, who should be providing those high-level duties, is not able to do that because she is doing the day-to-day work. And so she is in the weeds on payroll and onboarding and offboarding and making sure things look right. She's in the weeds on our HR management system. So we have an HR management system where people enter their time and request leave. She's the expert on that. Whether or not she probably shouldn't be, because she should be spending her time on things like ensuring that we are retaining employees and employee wellness and helping supervisors supervise their staff. So this HR coordinator would assist in freeing up her time to provide those more high-level duties. So the day-to-day would be done by the HR coordinator, and our HR manager really truly could be an HR manager. And also things like classification and compensation, which she worked a ton on. If we don't get this position, what I anticipate is we won't be able to spend the time on things like employee engagement, which could lead to more turnover. We also have a number of judicial well-being projects that we're looking at over the next few years, and that may take more time or not happen at all if we can't get the day-to-day work done.
Questions? Representative Walters.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Probably an obvious answer, but I'm going to ask a question anyhow. The court's remote work policy following the COVID issues, and then if you do have any folks remote working, are any of them permanently living out of state?
Ms. Butler.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Walters, we do have a remote work policy for the employees within the administrative office of the courts. We are currently working on a policy that could be used throughout the courts. In some places, it's just not very feasible, like our circuit court clerks. They can't work remotely. We need you there in the office. The district courts, they manage their staff as they see fit. And I believe there are some remote employees. I don't know how many of those work out of state. We currently in the administrative office have 2 out of state within the Supreme Court and the AOC. My apologies, not just the AOC. We have 1 in the AOC. And we do have 10 within the Supreme Court and the AOC who are fully remote employees. They work fully remote.
Senator Salazar?
Are those numbers correct with the total on the cost for that position? Is that a normal, is that the normal rate for a position like that?
Are you looking at the HR coordinator, Senator?
Correct.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Salazar, so what that amounts to would be 64,000, just over 64,000 annually for the employee, right? And then you add on benefits and some other things. And so, yes, what we did with each one of these positions is we did run them through the Hay methodology and classified them accordingly and found the
Yeah.
appropriate salary.
As a reminder for those who may be following along with the budget books, those salaries that are listed there are in a biennium format, meaning it looks like it's a 2-year salary paid. So you want to divide that by 2 to get the annual salary. Representative Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to be clear, are these numbers reflective of the market rate as to the percentage of market rate? Are they 90% or higher?
Ms. Butler, can you explain the Hay study?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Henderson, we budgeted each of these positions at 94% of market, which is where we hope to be at the end of legislative session on average for all of our employees. So they are budgeted at 94%.
Representative Larson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Lisa, if I could go back to Representative Walder's questions on the 2 out-of-state employees that are working remotely. Were they hired and then did we hire them as out-of-state full-time employees, or did they relocate and you just kept them on and allowed them to work remotely? Can you give us a little feel for that?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, the employee within the AOC he lived out of state when we hired him. The reason that we hired him is he is the one who is in charge of our courtroom technology, and we stole him from our vendor, who is Utah Corporation. So he travels in Wyoming extensively. I think he's visited all of the courtrooms throughout the state to ensure that the technology is in the courtroom is working the way that it should. I don't know about the other position.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting committee. That's the second agency we've heard from that their kind of IT specialist does work remote. So not unique for the judicial branch, kind of interesting. Please proceed.
Madam Chairwoman, the next position is a public information officer. So what we have learned over the last few years is that we really do need to provide better outreach and education to citizens throughout the state on what the judicial branch actually does. You all see, I think, pretty regularly in the news what we think the judicial branch actually does, and the fact that often state judicial branches are associated with the federal judicial branch, which is very different. And so as we've moved through this new process of working with the JBI, the Judicial Branch Innovation Task Force, what we found is our outreach needs to expand substantially. Right now, our public information officer is Chief Justice Fox. So it's not necessarily her highest and best use. And there are other things that we could do much better in terms of transparency, providing outreach, and ensuring that we are answering questions that come in regularly. So this is a request for a public information officer. If we don't get this, some of the worthier, programs on outreach will be very limited. You Be the Judge is one of those. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to have a You Be the Judge presentation in your communities, but they are really neat. It's a mock oral argument for the community. And so that one is something that was begun a number of years ago, I think when Justice Burke was the chief. And it went really well for a while, and then it's just kind of been fledgling for a bit. So I think that's something that we could definitely reinvigorate and would be very good for the communities throughout the state. It's difficult to do with our current staff. And so a public information officer would help with things like that.
Questions on the PIO? Right, moving on.
Madam Chairwoman, the next position is Behavioral Health Services Manager, and that's on, oh, sorry. My apologies. The next position is the Education Training Coordinator and Content Creator. So this is a position that we currently have within the administrative office, but it's a time-limited position. What this person does is she helps substantially with planning conferences. We do a number of conferences throughout the year for judges, for clerks, to ensure that we're providing appropriate education. We also have a learning management system, which is a new method to provide education to the personnel in the branch and also to district court clerks. So our learning management system is an on-demand online system where judges and clerks can get online and start learning. We've started to use it really substantially when onboarding new employees. And this position is the one who populates all of that content on our learning management system. She has proved to be invaluable to our branch and to our office. So this, without this position, a lot of those things would have to be taken on by other staff in our office. I anticipate that the learning management system would suffer substantially, and planning conferences and doing the logistics of that is incredibly time consuming. It would have to be taken on by another member of our staff. So Madam Chair, with that, if there aren't any questions, I will move on to the next position, which is the Behavioral Health Services Manager. This is a position that we have seen in other states, and one that we think could be very helpful and engaged not only with the judicial branch, but also with the other branches of government. I would say over the last year, as the chief mentioned, our branch and our personnel have become very engaged with the executive branch, with the legislative branch in terms of the mental health crisis that's happening in Wyoming right now. This person would take on those duties and alleviate that from other staff members. Right now, the person in our office who is doing the vast majority of the work for these projects and programs is our chief legal officer. So he has many, many hats that he wears. He is our legal counsel. He also was originally the director of Chancery Court, so he still works in Chancery Court, acts as the law clerk for Chancery Court, and he does all of our behavioral health services work. So he's incredible, but also substantially overworked. So this would be a position that would do a couple of things. One, engagement with the other branches of government, continue that 3-branch initiative to address mental health in the state. And the second is, as you may remember, the legislature passed a bill to transition the treatment court program to the judicial branch from the Department of Health. That transition will happen on July 1st of next year. And we are continuing in that transition. We are working hard. We will be ready for it. But this position could assist with expanding that program, making it more robust, and ensuring that more people throughout the state are able to take advantage of treatment courts. And then the last one is the diversion.
Representative Larson.
On all of these, we kind of assume what the qualifications are, but I would just curious on your behavioral health one, what type of qualifications are you expecting, or would you be looking for in that type of administrator?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, I think we have a job description, and generally I think what we would equate it to is a social services program manager, somebody who has vast experience in mental and behavioral health, who has worked in the area or has some substantial education in that area.
And follow up, Madam Chairman, and you noted the legislature moved the drug courts, the Supreme Court. Who requested them?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, we supported it. I think
Thank you.
So the last piece of the behavioral health services manager position would help with the diversion pilot and then expansion of that program. So making sure that we're not seeing the same people in our courts throughout the state and diverting them to mental health services. And so as the chief mentioned, we are piloting that, I believe, next month in Campbell County. And the expansion of that really does depend on ensuring that we have appropriate resources for the expansion. Right now, I can tell you without a position, I'm not sure we could take on that expansion, or at least it would have to be a very, very slow expansion.
Ms. Butler, I'm intrigued by this potential opportunity for its primary purpose, but also as it relates to Title 25. I know that the Joint Judiciary Committee looked at that for a number of years and didn't come up with any meaningful solutions, I think because of the size and the complexity of the challenge. And so do you think that this position could evaluate that and provide better services?
Madam Chairwoman, absolutely. I think that fits squarely within what we would expect this position to do. The other piece, just from a legal standpoint, is competency evaluations and continuing to work with the Department of Health to speed those up and finding creative solutions to make sure that we're getting people the evals that they need, and then also doing that in a timely way.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, the next position is a court services officer. So this position really would be intended to service the courts, the clerks, the judges, and basically whatever they need. Some of these specific things that we think this position could do is assisting in creating uniform forms for pro se litigants, staffing committees related to court services. So we have a bond committee that meets annually after the legislature to update our bond schedule. We currently have a forms committee that meets regularly, as I said, to update those pro se forms. This position would maintain and manage the retention schedule and work with state archives to make sure that those are consistent. Develop a judicial branch digital retention policy, which we don't currently have, and then provide technical assistance to the courts in implementing new statutory changes, new rules. How does that work? What does the process look like? That's one of the things that we struggle with currently. If we don't get this position, some of those services that are really vital to the courts I don't want to say they're not going to happen, but they won't happen as quickly or as well. And so this is a position that would really assist in making sure that our courts are functioning at their highest level. Right. The next position is a court navigator administrator. So the court navigator program is a program that we're working on piloting in Natrona County in the first quarter of next year. That program really is designed to help self-represented litigants navigate the court system. So assist them in determining which forms they need to fill out, when they need to be at court, what they should look like when they go to court, how they should address the judge, talk to them about, what the court process is going to be, and then assist them in ensuring that they get a result. So this is really, the benefits of this we see are really twofold. One is for the self-represented litigants, the citizens of the state, to help them better understand how to navigate the system. The second really is to alleviate the burden of self-represented litigants on the court system. Our judges and the clerks, the circuit court clerks and the district court clerks, spend substantial amounts of time with self-represented litigants trying to help them navigate that court system now. Again, not their highest and best use. So if there's some assistance that we can provide, we'd like to do that. The court navigator administrator really would be in charge of overseeing that program. As I said, we'll pilot in Natrona County next year, and we hope to expand that program to other locations throughout the state. What that looks like, we don't know yet, but I anticipate there will be some in-person and some remote participation by court navigators. Right now, we're looking at enlisting volunteers to become court navigators since we don't have positions for those actual navigators. And this person would help with the logistics of that, scheduling court navigators, making sure they're there, overseeing their work, educating them, finding the space for court navigators, and then helping them with any kind of technology that we need for a remote court navigator program. Without this position, what we would probably, again, be looking at is either halting the expansion of that court navigator pilot or making it very, very slow over the next couple of years. Again, just because the resources we have within our office are already pretty strained. All right, Madam Chair, the last position
The bench is getting cool. Never a good sign.
is the Chief Information Officer. So within the Administrative Office of the Courts, as we've talked about, we have two separate, what we call divisions. One is IT, and they do equipment, hardware, cybersecurity, networking, internet, all of those kinds of, we call them the cans and wires guys. And then we have our software applications division, which handles all of our court automation software, as we discussed. What would be incredibly helpful is to have a chief information officer so we can combine those two divisions under one division, somebody who really understands how those two interact. Right now, we have two fantastic leads of those two separate divisions, but they are experts in their own area. Our Nate Goddard, who is our Chief Information Officer, he is an expert on IT things. Heather Kenworthy, who is the head of our software applications division, she is an expert on software applications. But having somebody who can oversee both so that we can be more forward thinking about how we can utilize both of those divisions would be helpful. Right now, I play that role. I think we do an okay job, but I guarantee we could be doing better in that sphere. So this Chief Information Officer is somebody who could combine our two divisions, be more forward thinking about technology within the branch and ensuring that what we're doing is good and that we can make it better in the future.
Representative Stitt?
Madam Chairman, Ms. Butler, on these 10 positions, you've listed them 1 through 10. Are they listed, and you may have already said this, are they listed in the order of priority that the judicial branch cares about them, or are there some that are more important than others in the event that the legislature were to not approve all 10 requested positions?
Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Stith, they are in priority order now. I mean, so if we were to get all 10 positions, that would be the priority order. I can tell you, if there are certain positions that this body in the legislature decides that they don't want to fund, or they just say we only want to fund 5, what we would really appreciate is the opportunity to reevaluate that priority order and see if that would change.
Representative Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sure you know the market pretty well in terms of what the availability is for this kind of talent. I'm curious to know what your perspective is relative to, okay, we've identified positions. What are the likelihoods of those positions being adequately recruited in a reasonable amount of time over the next biennium?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Henderson, I don't know that I can speak to each one of those positions. I would imagine some of them are going to be difficult to find. A CIO in particular, I think would be a difficult thing to find in Wyoming with the expertise that we would ask for. Some of the positions we have experience in filling. So the software application support, we actually have an open position, similar position open right now, and we have gotten a number of applicants. So I think it just varies substantially in terms of the level of expertise that we're requesting.
Representative Walters?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Back to your position number 10, the Chief Information Officer, and I think I understand your explanation, but I just want to make sure, because the court previously or currently has a Chief Information Officer.
So,
And essentially, so what is the need for the new one is kind of the question, but what I think I heard you describe is you have a CIO and then you have another person that's sort of a co-CIO and one works on the wires on side of it and one works on the software side. And this new position would be more of a director of CIOs, you might say, that would sit above those two people. Is my generic description anywhere close?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Walters, you're exactly correct, and I actually misspoke. We have a chief technology officer. I called it a chief information officer. We have a chief technology officer and a chief applications officer, but a CIO, yes, would oversee both of those divisions.
Follow up?
Mhm.
So then that brings me back to my bigger question. You had a CIO before, it's my understanding, and now you're requesting a new CIO. So what happened to the previous position that you titled a CIO?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Walters, we did have a CIO, and a few years ago, she left the judicial branch. And as we were evaluating our positions, what we found is we had substantial expertise within both technology and applications. And so based on what we had and their expertise, we split that division into two. So it was no longer, technology. We split it up in between IT, the cans and wires guys, and then our software applications division. And so we just never filled that position. And again, I've kind of filled the role of CIO since then. But it could be done better.
Further questions? Looks like this total request for these positions is 6.3 million.
Madam Chair, so slipping to the next page, which is SC8, you will find the total exception request for those positions in the biennium. The exception request is just under 2.5 million. But with the standard budget for the administrative office of the courts, yes, it would amount to 6.3 for the biennium.
Questions from the committee?
So, Madam Chair,
Co-chairman?
so I think at least some of us want to have these prioritized if we don't fund all of them. So you requested the ability to go back and do that. So would you do that, please? Just in case you don't get them all.
Mr. Co-chairman, my understanding is, this seems to be a question from a number of committee members. Based on what we would deny, you would then want to reevaluate, prioritize based on what you would no longer be receiving, as opposed to, because what you have presented 1 through 10 is actually your priority list. But if we cut 3, 7, and 9, it doesn't automatically reshuffle in order.
Madam Chair, that's correct. I
So
mean,
your preference would be, I'm sorry to interrupt. If it almost works better if we give you a number. So then you can put in who you want. Is that fair?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Co-chairman, yes.
Okay. That helps.
Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairman, excuse me.
Representative Walters?
Thank you. So on that note, maybe a priority list if you were to receive 25% of the funding, one if you were to receive 50, and one if you were to receive 75% might be a starting point on how to approach answering the question that Co-Chairman Nicholas just asked.
Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairman, Representative Walters, we can do that.
Further questions from the committee?
I think the co-chair might want to give you more positions.
I do not. I do not want to provide more positions. I am curious to know on the behavioral health position of whether or not that particular position could actually result in cost savings to the state. And that's what I was thinking about on that Title 25 piece. I do think Title 25 in general is a huge financial expense that is because it's not administered effectively or efficiently and is so convoluted across the state in its application and the costs associated with treating those patients, that there's a potential here to evaluate how all of the counties are doing it and find smarter ways.
Madam Chair, if I could respond to that. I think the whole idea behind both treatment court and mental health diversion is to save money, among other things, by avoiding the revolving door of incarceration. And all the ripple effects of that, if you help someone become a productive citizen, keep their children, keep their job, keep their home, a lot of better things happen for the state, even if you just want to talk about it in economic terms. So yes, ideally, that position is a money saver. The pilot project in Gillette is designed to measure some of those things. Again, those metrics are difficult, but we are trying to keep data before and after on like duration of incarceration and those kinds of things that impose costs both on the state and the counties, because usually that incarceration is going to be in the county jail. So yes, ideally, these are money saving. That is a money saving position. And if we had to reshuffle, I would move that up from 7.
Senator Salazar?
Can I go back to the PIO position? Again, is that, to me, that's a big number. Is that using the formula again?
Madam Chairman, Senator Salazar, it is a big number, and I think it reflects the expertise and the extent of the job that we'd expect this person to do. Essentially, it would be expanding what we have done in the administrative office, which is not much outreach, to be frank with you, and not much evaluation in terms of how the branch is doing and, you know, getting feedback from people who go through the branch and trying to investigate and think of creative solutions to do better. So I think we did do the Hay classification based on how we wrote the job description and how we would hope that this person would provide value to the state and to our office in terms of transparency and ensuring that folks throughout the state understand what the judicial branch does. So I don't know if that answers your question very well at all, but yes, it is a big number, but really the extent of the job is big.
Senator Guru?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The court navigator position. When did you say you were going to have the pilot in Turner County? It was in Turner County.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Guru, first quarter of next year is when we plan to launch the pilot.
If I can follow up. Yeah, because I've actually seen this not in action and in action, and how much time it burns in a courtroom. Seems like, with all due respect, judges seem to fall into 2 categories on this. When folks walk up and say, I'm going to represent myself. Judges who are extremely helpful, thereby spend a whole lot of time acting almost as a de facto lawyer for someone sitting there, and it burns up a lot of court time. And I know it happens in the back room with the clerks as well. And then the other kind, you say, you're a fool for representing yourself, and I'm not going to help you. And then that person walks away having a whole, different view of the justice system. So both of which are not good outcomes either way. And so this one seems to me to have the greatest potential to affect, dollar savings, time management practices, all of it for the people involved. So I guess my question is that when you do this, depending on, I don't know how this will all work out with these positions, but either way, really track that time. So you can, whether it's coming back to evaluate the position that we gave or the other way, how you can make that case to say, this is how much time it saved. This is the cost. These are the dollars. This is, how you can play that out and make that business case. Thank
Ms.
you.
Butler?
Madam Chairman, Senator Guru, so this, in order to pilot this program, this is one of the grants that we received from the State Justice Institute. So we have contracted with the National Center for State Courts, and we are looking at those metrics right now to try to ensure that we can provide accurate data on how effective the program is when we pilot it.
And one more,
Follow-up?
thank you. Yes, and if you had data from other jurisdictions now that you could provide us while we make this decision, it might be most helpful.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Guru, we'll look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Larson?
Justice Fox, you know, as you talk about the mental health service manager, I would just note that in the mental health task force that you were good enough to help, you and Elise were good enough to participate in on, that's probably, that got out the gate the fastest. And we have a pilot program in Gillette, but recapping, we done that to find out what we don't know and how to implement it and see how that looks statewide. So that position, in order to assess, really has some value in assessing what we do learn, and then to develop that statewide system for that type of diversion. With this approved, how long, if that's approved, how long do you think it would take to fill that position, and can we get it in time to get them in the game and score some points?
Chief Justice?
There we go. Madam Chair, Representative Larson. Yes, so I can't tell you exactly how long it would take to fill that position. As soon as possible would be my answer. We did, as you know, design the Campbell County pilot project to be a pilot that provides us with the information on how effective it is and what kind of cost savings result from it. We have a number of communities. The most enthusiastic people about this program are sheriffs. And that is because their jails have become mental health institutions, and they don't think that that's what they were designed to do. And they're probably right. So we have a lot of requests. Natrona County is chomping at the bit to start a diversion program. And they don't really want to wait till we get the results back. They're just sure that it will be effective. And I think that they're right. I think it would be nice to get the data that we need, but that will be probably a couple years. So to answer your question, the sooner we can get the person in and start expanding this program, the better. And as I said, we have a lot of communities that are really anxious to get it going. And it will tie in really neatly with the behavioral health redesign, because it goes hand in hand with providing more robust mental health services in all of our communities and, you know, targeting that criminally involved population.
All right, further questions? If not, Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, moving on to the next unit within this division, the Supreme Court Chambers and Clerk's Office. So as I mentioned earlier, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of all issues involving Wyoming law. So they're the final say. They work really hard to provide good precedent to the attorneys and citizens of the state. The Supreme Court budget originally was encompassed within the administration budget. And so what we have done this year is we have separated those two units out. So the Supreme Court and Clerk's Office, which really is geared toward hearing cases, writing decisions. That is the new budget or the new unit that you are looking at today. And we separated out administration, which is what you just heard. The Supreme Court funds 5 justices, and within each of those justices' chambers, they have 2 law clerks and a judicial assistant. It also funds the Supreme Court Clerk's Office, which currently has 2 employees. So what you'll see beginning on pages SC 10 you see a 3-year period of statistics of the kinds of cases that the Supreme Court has heard. The Supreme Court Clerk's Office also processes bar applications through that clerk of court, and you'll see the number of bar applications that were processed, as well as the Supreme Court hears disciplinary cases for attorneys. And so you'll see that number there. The standard budget request for the Supreme Court and Clerk's Office is 7.7 million, and there are no exception requests within this unit. Right. Madam Chairwoman, moving on to the next unit, which is pro se packets. So this unit encompasses funds that we receive for pro se packets. So throughout the state, what we do is we have packets for self-represented litigants in a number of different areas, and those are listed on page SC 13. And those packets are provided in paper to folks who come to the clerk's offices. So you can access those packets online, but if you go to the clerk's office, they will provide you a paper copy for $10. And then those funds are deposited into an account, a special revenue account. There is no general fund money attached to this unit. And essentially, it funds itself. So printing those packets for the clerk's offices throughout the state. The other piece that we use this fund for is forms automation. So we've been working toward creating a system where self-represented litigants can fill out forms online in a way that's understandable to them, and that will automate that process. So that's what these funds are used for. The standard budget request is $50,000. Again, this is just special revenue funds, and it's a request for spending authority. There's no general funds attached to this unit.
Question.
Senator Kinsky?
I'm curious, the navigator is going to be, I would assume 80% of the navigator's time is helping people with this process, domestic relations, where they're trying to figure out how to fill out these things and represent themselves in a divorce.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Kinsky, that's absolutely correct. And then one of the other things that our office is working on right now, along with a number of judges who have volunteered their time, is to update those forms and make them more usable for self-represented litigants and for the Court Navigator program.
Thank you.
All right, next section, Ms. Butler.
Madam Chairwoman, moving on to the next unit within this division is the Children's Justice Project. The Children's Justice Project is an entity designed to assist children who had come into the system due to allegations of abuse or neglect and help them achieve permanency more quickly. So that really is the mission of the Children's Justice Project. It works with a number of different stakeholders, including judges, DFS, the GAL program, and others. This is a federally funded unit. There are no general fund dollars attached to this unit. And the standard budget request is $688,930.
Senator Kinsky?
So this person it's intended to expedite permanent outcomes for abused and neglected children. How do they do that?
Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Kinsky, in a number of different ways. So our CJP staff provides substantial amounts of education to judges, to county attorneys, to DFS staff. We have been in, I think, every county in the state over the last year, providing that kind of education. We also have a data project that we work on every year to determine how quickly we're moving those kinds of cases through the court. And we will look at, which courts are doing well or which judicial districts are doing well and which are not doing so well, and how we can leverage those practices in the courts that are doing well in some of the other counties. So this is a process where we work with a number of different stakeholders to try to attain quicker permanency for children.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Senator Salazar?
Can I ask, how many minors benefit this on a yearly basis?
Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Salazar, I don't know the answer to that, mostly because CJP doesn't directly work with the children themselves. They work with kind of the system. We can tell you how many children come into the court system where their parents have been abused, have been alleged to have abused or neglected them, but I can't tell you direct benefit, just because it's a system kind of project and not necessarily a one-on-one with this child. Is that,
Madam Chair, so how many is that?
um,
Or if you don't have it, maybe you can get it to me later.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Salazar, we can absolutely get that to you. I just don't have it in front of me.
That may be available on the DFS website. But I think to Senator Salazar's question, I think that the statistics on SC 15 are indicative of how the system in Wyoming works overall when looking at the reunification numbers, depending on how you feel about that. But reunification in Wyoming, our statistics are 75%. So it means the child goes back with their parents. And the system has determined that that's the right result in what the law requires. And the rest of the country is only at 47%. So Wyoming is consistent with the law and achieving those results of returning those children back to those homes. Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, turning to the next unit, which begins on SC 17. This is the Equal Justice Wyoming unit. Again, this is a special revenue funded unit. There are no general funds attached to this unit. Equal Justice Wyoming is designed to assist self-represented litigants in civil cases when they meet an indigency standard. And so EJW provides a lot of resources to self-represented litigants, again, kind of to help them navigate, also to provide representation when it's appropriate and when the litigant actually meets those standards that are set forth by statute. So Equal Justice Wyoming was created statutorily, and that statute begins 5/2/121. That is the Wyoming Civil Legal Services Act. It is funded through a $10 fee that is assessed on civil cases and criminal cases that goes into a special revenue fund that EJW uses to provide those kinds of services to self-represented litigants throughout the state. Madam Chairwoman, this completes the administration division. And so we will move on to the next division.
Representative Walters?
Madam Chairman, back on page 18, it appears to be missing the table that would indicate when this fund is actually going to go negative. So it's on a decline, but the table's not in there to really show precisely. Could you elaborate?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Walters, I don't think we have projected out that far as to when the fund will be entirely depleted. But we can.
Thank you.
All right, please proceed.
Madam Chairwoman, moving on to SC 20, you will find the next division, which is the Judicial Nominating Commission. In Wyoming, we select our judges through merit selection. So what that process looks like is when a vacancy for a judgeship opens, attorneys submit applications. Those applications are reviewed by the Judicial Nominating Commission, which is made up of 3 members of the Wyoming State Bar, and they are elected by the Wyoming State Bar, 3 lay members who are appointed by the governor, and then the Chief Justice serves as the chair of that commission. Once the applicants from attorneys are received by the Judicial Nominating Commission, they are reviewed, and then the Judicial Nominating Commission chooses 3 candidates out of that applicant pool Those 3 candidates go to the governor, and the governor appoints one of those candidates for the judicial vacancy. For this budget this year, the budget actually does not pay any salaries, my apologies, for the Judicial Nominating Commission, but it does pay for travel. And so what the Judicial Nominating Commission does is it travels to each of the locations where the vacancy is to do interviews of those applicants. And so this pays for their travel to those locations. What you'll find on SC 21 are just some statistics about the number of applicants and the number of interviews that the JNC has done over the last little bit. It's a lot, and I think the chief can attest to that. But what we have seen over the last couple of years is that it's really stabilized within the judiciary. We don't have as many vacancies, although we have a couple that we know will be coming up because they will reach the constitutional age of 70 in the district court and the Supreme Court. And so we currently have two positions, and the Judicial Nominating Commission is working through that right now, at least on one of them, and the other one has gone up to the governor. We have 6 other potential retirements in the next biennium. The average cost of travel per vacancy is about $6,000. We aren't asking for any exception requests within this budget, and the standard budget request is $34,942. Madam Chairwoman, moving on to the next division, this is the Chancery Court Division. You already heard the chief mention this about the process that we went through to stand up Chancery Court. The purpose of Chancery Court is to provide really a forum for rapid resolution of certain kinds of cases. And so the Chancery Court has a rocket docket, we call it. It's a very, very quick docket. And it's designed to help litigants who want a quick resolution to their cases and don't want to wait. And so I think it's 150 days is the goal. I can tell you that goal is hard to meet, and especially when you consider things like service. So we've had some of the litigants who are actually located outside the United States. So getting those folks served is difficult. The pleading stage is maybe the stage that takes the most time. We currently have 2 district court judges who are acting as Chancery Court judge, Judge Stephen Sharp, who is here in Laramie County, and Judge Rick Lavery, who is located in Sweetwater County. As I mentioned earlier, Ben Birmingham from our office does all of the law clerk type work. And then we have 1 filing clerk that is currently employed through that Chancery Court budget. We anticipate that we will be looking to seat a Chancery Court judge in the upcoming year. Statutorily, we are required to do that no later than January of 25. So we are on target to meet that statutory requirement. The standard budget request for this unit is 1.2 million, and we are not asking for any exception requests.
Co-Chairman?
Rick, could you give us, just not right now, but an update on the Chancery Court in terms of the number of filings?
It's right there in the book,
I'm looking at it.
42.
But what I'm really interested in is how quickly they settle, how many trials there have been, and the overall time. And then also, I mean, when we talked earlier, the question is, with the Chancery Court, now any party can opt out. And if that is the question is that appropriate for this type of a proceeding? Or is there another mechanism that we could essentially either require or some other kind of process so that, you know, if you don't have a great case, the last thing you want to do is go to Chancery Court because you want to delay for your client. And that shouldn't be the purpose of Chancery Court, or, you know, to go to a slower docket just because you want it to slow things down. And so maybe it could be the type of case, if it's strictly a business case or whatever it is, that once it's in, or some mechanism to modify our current practices.
Chief Justice?
Madam Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, you know, initially I was opposed to the opt-out because I thought essentially that lawyers are conservative people and they don't want to try an experiment if they don't have to. And for other strategic reasons, people might opt out. But as it turns out, our case numbers have increased gradually over time, and I don't think the ability to opt out is depriving Chancery Court of its utility. I also know that there was a lot of resistance, especially from district court judges, for it to be mandatory because of the possible implications of district courts being a constitutionally established court of general jurisdiction. I don't know the answer to that question. I just know that there were concerns about it, and that was the reason really for allowing the opt-out.
So what I've been told is that these are kind of the fun cases, and so if all the business cases go to Chancery Court, then the district courts don't get a modification of the type of cases. Too many of one type and not enough of another.
Madam Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, it's true that there are judges who really appreciate those kinds of cases. Not all of them, though.
Further questions on the Chancery Court? Ms. Butler?
Madam Chair and Mr. Co-Chair, just to follow up, we can get you the timelines of some of those cases and how quickly they come to resolution and what that looks like. We do have some stats on the kinds of cases that have come in and what the results of those are. And I can't tell you how quickly they have settled, but as of this year, there are 3 overall that have settled. A couple of them have objected to the Chancery Court forum, 5 of them. And then we have a number that are open and pending. But
5 out of how many filed?
I think we're at 35.
The book says 42.
42. We're at 42.
Madam Chair, could I add that I believe there has not been a trial yet, but there are 2 scheduled that they sound like they're going to go, I think, in January and February.
Madam Chair.
Representative Walters?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just so the committee's aware, I will be bringing a bill on this to change the date from the 150 days will be from the point of the scheduling order, which my understanding is if the current way it's written, it doesn't allow both sides of the argument enough time to get done what they need to do prior to that. So this was an ask of the courts and the folks that have used it that I know very little about, but just want the committee to be aware of.
Is that currently in rule or statute?
Madam,
Madam Chair, it's both, but statute number 1. It is 150 days, I think, from the initiation. And Representative Walters' bill would make it from the date, from the scheduling order, which would allow whatever time is necessary to get everybody served.
So you, just to follow up, you think it's a good bill?
Oh, nobody's going to opine. So.
No, I asked the question. Is it necessary? Or is it a good idea? And just tell us the pros and cons.
Madam Chair, Representative Nicholas, the reality is that the 150 days from initiation is really not achievable. And even though I think the statutory language says that that's the goal for most, it gives a little wiggle room. What the judges have said is, let's give us a realistic goal that we can actually not just aim for, but accomplish. So
Yeah, I think it's important that we know that so that when we're on the floor of the House or trying to support this bill, particularly on a 2/3 introduction thing, that we can get as much support as we can. So appreciate that.
Not sure it'll be a big controversial bill, but thank you for the feedback.
Madam Chairman.
Senator
Just having Tom's
Anderson,
name on it might make a consequence.
it does. Certainly suspect as to why he would be bringing that bill. Senator Anderson?
Madam Chairman, question, have we filled that judge job in the Chancery Court in Casper yet, or is it still the TD Wise?
Madam Chair, Senator Anderson, that position is not filled. It's still being carried by our 2 district court judges. We intend to fill it in 24.
And I think on that topic, Chief Justice, and the fact that that court is located in Casper, I think it'd be helpful information to know the location of most of the litigants in that court. And if Casper really actually makes sense as we look back 2020, if that was the right decision. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we could provide that, but that space is there in the Thyra Thompson building.
Space downtown too, right here in your state's capital. Thank you, Chief Justice. All right, we'll move on. Thanks.
Madam Chairwoman, that brings us to SC 26, which is the next division under the Supreme Court agency, and that is the library. You will find the narrative for that on SC 27. The State Law Library provides legal research, materials, and assistance to the courts, to attorneys, to litigants, and to the public. It also houses the Judicial Learning Center, which generally gets about 1,500 visitors annually. I can tell you Wyoming and Colorado are leading the way on civics education for the judiciary. We looked at Colorado's Judicial Learning Center when we created ours in 2016, and there has been a ton of interest. It's a great space down in our law library. What we have looked at over the last few years within the library is how to shift what we do to become more relevant. And so we've done a study of other law libraries throughout the United States and looked at how they provide services and what kind of services they provide. What we have found is many of the state law libraries throughout the United States really do provide just book services. They don't do anything too much outside of that. However, we have determined that we do need to become more relevant to folks and citizens throughout the state, right? Historically, the law library was a place for attorneys to go and look at books and do legal research. Currently, most attorneys do their research online. We do have some that still come into the library, especially for, we call them treatises or secondary sources. They provide an area of law that you can kind of flip through and figure out where you need to go. I think those are probably the most used, as well as the Wyoming materials. But generally, most attorneys are doing their research remotely and online. And so we're looking at different ways to become, to be able to serve the citizens of Wyoming better, including potentially a self-help resource center. We also provide online legal research for folks who come into the library. So we have Westlaw online. If you come into the library, you can use Westlaw. You can't use it remotely through the library. You still have to pay for your Westlaw account if you're an attorney, unless you come into the library to use that resource. We have 2 exception requests on page SC 28. The first is for resources and materials. We have looked at our collection pretty extensively over the last few years, and we have cut quite a bit of it. But what we have found is to maintain the collection as it's used today and to maintain what we think is relevant to attorneys, we're still seeing those costs escalate over time. The law library has not seen additional money in its standard budget since budget fiscal year 13. And even after that, in the supplemental session, our law library budget was cut, I think, by $150,000. So the budget year fiscal 13, we got 50,000, and the next year we got cut by 150,000. The law library was then cut in budget fiscal year 17 and budget fiscal year 21. And this is all in a time where materials have increased in cost. And so what we experience over a biennium with the law library is that the budget is not enough to cover the resources that we keep there. So the first exception request is to cover those materials and resources. $75,000 is the amount that we've been short in that budget over the last few biennia. And so that is the budget, the exception request for resources and materials. The other exception request within the Law Library Division is for the Judicial Learning Center. So we launched the Judicial Learning Center in 2016. The exhibits are all the same as the ones that were there in 2016. they require updates. A lot of them are not static exhibits, they are interactive exhibits. We have a lot of screens, we have a lot of computers, and we need to maintain those over time to ensure that people have the ability to access those exhibits. And what we're seeing is some of those are beginning to fail.
Madam Chair.
Co-chairman?
So I'm just curious because we had a kind of a matching program with the State Bar when we did the Learning Center. Is there any thoughts about if we put matching requirements on this 30,000 so that the State Bar might kick in some components to it to help upkeep this thing?
Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Nicholas, I don't think we would be opposed. Edie Troutwine was the one who really spearheaded all of this effort. And so I know that she did work very hard on getting those matching funds. And again, I don't think we'd be opposed to
Thank
something
you.
like that.
Question. Do the,
Get a vote?
do the county courts draw upon the same subscription for their legal research as this subscription in the law library, or do they have a different subscription?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Kinsky, you said the county libraries. I'm sorry, I missed.
No, county judges, county courts.
Oh, so, Madam Chair, Senator Kinsky, our law library, the funds that come out of our law library and are budgeted do provide the Westlaw accounts for judges throughout the state.
Okay. And so what does this budget look like if it's just the subscriptions that the Supreme Court and the county courts need to do their work? It's not a subscription for the public. You don't have the books. I mean, I've been in more and more law firms where the books are just decoration. You get it down to just what you need to do your work.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Kinsky, we would have to look at that. It would substantially change the way that it would do away with the law library, essentially.
Correct. There is the University of Wyoming Library. What do you have that they don't?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Kinsky, ours are legal materials, all legal. And so I think we do have a number of legal materials that are not housed within the state library.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Madam Chairwoman, that takes us to
Representative Larson.
And I know it's kind of a tender subject, but I think Senator Kinsky hits on an interesting point based on what you said in that the attorneys generally do most of this online now and not a law there. So are we trying to find ways to keep something in place that's antiquated? And is there value continuing with the library, or is it time to keep it as an archive and move forward? And does that make sense? And does that question make sense? I'm just trying to
And I think Senator Kinsky was referring to the law school library for legal treatises. And so
Madam Co-Chair, I was asking why the Supreme Court doesn't just have its own subscription and the archival materials go over to the state, that the University of Wyoming Law Library. If that's the only thing that's different between what UW provides and what the state's providing, then move those archival materials to UW and it's a question of what does this look like if you do what most law firms do, which is the books are just decorations.
Madam Chair, Senator Kinsky, Representative Larson. I think that would be a tragedy. If we were cut down as judges to just what we can find on Westlaw, it's true that Westlaw is our probably primary research tool, but very often we're using the materials in the law library. For example, as Elisa mentioned, the treatises. So if we're starting to research an issue of criminal law, there's a whole multi-volume set on just the Fourth Amendment that I want to go down there and leaf through those books and wallow around in the case law to really fully grasp it before I start to pare down the way that I'm going to analyze a particular issue in front of us. And I'm always telling my law clerks who came through law school, only, as far as I can tell, using Westlaw, go downstairs, use those books, because it's the only way I believe in wallowing in the treatises and the case law and really understanding the landscape of an issue before you try to focus in on that decision. So to deprive us of those resources or to even move them over the hill, I think would be very unfortunate. And I understand that law firms are doing away with books. But I have two things to say about that. We're not just law firms. And law firms use our resources. This is where they go if they need to find that Fourth Amendment treatise. And they could, I suppose, also use the law school, but a lot of them use our library.
Madam Co-Chair.
Co-Chairman.
So I couldn't agree more with that statement. In fact, I've been trying to increase this budget every budget that comes around, because particularly on the secondary materials, frankly, Westlaw doesn't take you to them. And when they do, you're reading a half a page at a time. So you can't digest or read or print off the whole conceptual ideas of why the law is the way it is and how it progressed over time and the historical components of it. It's just, I think it's a tragedy that even our counties don't have sufficient law libraries. And the idea that, and even this library, by the way, is to me insufficient. And so, I mean, sometimes I go down to Denver in order to get really find treatises that I look for, because law school doesn't have what I'm looking for. And so I just think it's a well deserved need, and that should be fulfilled. So.
Well, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. And if you'd like to give us more money, while your co-chair gives us more positions, we would be delighted. Thank you.
It's really a fascinating conversation. Thank you. Fun fact, I'm a Zennial, which means I bridge the gap between the generations. So I learned both electronic and the books. And you do both and see the value of both. But I see things rapidly changing. The challenge with, I think, Westlaw and accessing those additional resources, the cost is exorbitant. And so the large firms certainly can sustain that, but your typical firm has very limited resources because of the substantial cost associated with accessing that. And so if we want to keep access to justice reasonable and quality lawyers, I do think that these resources availability is important. So with that, Ms. Butler?
Madam Chair, so the total exception request for this division is 105,000, and the total standard budget and exception request is 1.3 million. Moving on to the next division, which is the circuit courts. So that begins on SC 30. As I mentioned earlier, our circuit courts are courts of limited jurisdiction. They are also a statutory creation. And so they are set forth pursuant to statute. The state circuit court system covers 23 counties with 24 circuit court judges and 4 full-time magistrates. On SC 31, you will see a number of stats about the filings within the circuit courts over the last few years. Fiscally, the circuit courts are different than the district courts in that they are under the administrative and fiscal control of the Supreme Court. There's also a difference in staffing. So at the district court level, the chambers has a full staff of a law clerk, a judicial assistant, and a court reporter. At the circuit court level, the staff of the judge is the circuit court clerks. And so the circuit court clerks act as the judicial assistant for the judge, and then the circuit court judges do not have law clerks or court reporters. Just under 50 million passed through our circuit courts during the last biennium. There are 12 units within this division. The first 3 are costs shared by all circuit courts. The remaining 9 are just the 9 judicial district budgets throughout the state.
Representative Walters?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 32 in your exception request for the position, are you going to go through that more? Or are you, okay, I'll ask in a moment.
Madam Chair, moving on to SC 32, you will find our exception budget request for the circuit courts. As Chief Justice Fox mentioned earlier, this is one of our big requests, and it is 9 new positions in the circuit courts throughout the state. These circuit court positions have changed substantially in the last 10 years. The role of the circuit court clerk has changed. They are now professional positions. They are no longer just paper pushers, which is what we thought of them 10 to 15 years ago. The role really has shifted from filing to becoming a resource and a support for attorneys, self-represented litigants, law enforcement agencies, the Department of Corrections, collection agencies, and judges. We have implemented a number of new systems over the last 10 years. And many of those are to increase convenience for the citizens. And that increase in convenience for the citizens has burdened our circuit courts substantially. So as of today, we are scanning all of our documents in the circuit courts in full court enterprise. That provides additional public access to the citizens. We also have implemented video hearings. So remote hearings happen quite a bit in the circuit courts. The circuit court clerks are the ones who set that up. They test it. They answer questions about how to access it. We have a jury management system that allows for jurors to fill out their questionnaires online and submit those electronically. For those who don't, the clerks actually have to enter all of that information into the jury management system. We have an online payment system, as we discussed earlier. Often the clerks are forced to answer questions about how to navigate that system. We also, over the last few years, have implemented an online interpretation system, and that came out of COVID. So when we were doing a lot of remote hearings, we needed a way to have interpreters join remotely and not interrupt the process in court. And so we have implemented a new system that seamlessly allows interpreters to interpret without interrupting the court proceedings. That's, again, something that the circuit court clerks have to set up and manage throughout the hearing. We also have email filing in the circuit courts. We do not have e-filing. We have email filing. So people can email documents to be filed in the circuit courts, which means, again, those courts are accepting filings in a number of different ways: fax, paper, and email currently. What we have also seen both at the district and circuit court level is just increased time spent in hearings and on cases because people are not settling. And so we've seen a lot more bond and probation revocations, much longer hearings. So hearings that used to take an hour are now taking 3 to 4, less compromise and stipulation, more trials, and more appeals. The circuit courts have also, we have requested, our office has requested that they maintain a level of data accuracy that puts another burden on them. We are reporters to a number of different executive branch agencies throughout the state, including YDOT, DCI, and the Department of Health. We get a fair number of legislative requests about how our courts operate and research requests. These are all things that the clerks enter into the case management system and have to ensure their accuracy. We often go back and say, will you please fix this? Because this data is not correct. The other big burden, and I think many of you, those of you who are attorneys see this quite often, and we see it a lot in our courts, is the lack of attorneys has created another burden on the courts themselves. So the lack of affordable attorneys in some of our locations means that we have more self-represented litigants, and our clerks are providing more assistance to those self-represented litigants over time.
Ms. Butler, would you call it a crisis? This is the long-running joke in the Senate, of which I've said there's a crisis of a shortage of lawyers. My friends and colleagues don't believe me. But I appreciate the support that there's a lack of lawyers.
I thought you said there were too many short ones.
Not enough.
Yeah. So I do have a question.
Mhm.
So do you have data on the number of actual going to trials that you say they've increased over time, and the number of appeals and court time, and you say longer hearings? Is that things you keep track of?
Madam Chairwoman, Co-Chair Nicholas, we could get you the number. The amount of time that they spend in those hearings is not something that we currently track, and it's not data that we've asked them. That's anecdotal data and anecdotal in speaking with the clerks themselves.
Thank you.
We
Madam
are
Ch-
running short on time.
Madam Chairman,
Representative
if I
Stitt.
may. So, Ms. Butler, thank you. I take it the statutory duties of the circuit court clerks have not changed though, right? I mean, their duties are legal, their legal duties haven't changed from today, from say a decade ago, right?
Ms. Butler.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Stiff, I would say generally that's true, although there have been some statutory changes that have definitely burdened the clerks.
And Madam Chairman, as a follow-up, the circuit courts will be going to an electronic filing system also, right? And so here's the disconnect I have, is that we put a lot of money into information technology. And the purpose of putting money into information technology is to achieve productivity gains, is to get more done with fewer people. So one thing that the circuit court clerks have to do right now, which must be very onerous to them, is email filing, which is frankly an absurd process. But I take it that email filing will go extinct pretty shortly, right? That we'll have electronic filing, which will obviate the need for the circuit court clerk to get the email and print it out and then file the paper. I mean, so the question is, shouldn't we be achieving productivity gains through our information technology and through the electronic court filing system that will actually alleviate the labor burden of the circuit court clerks rather than increase it?
Is that premise true, Ms. Butler?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Stith, what we have found in talking with other states and even in the implementation of e-filing in Wyoming is that the job shifts, but the number of people needed to do that job remains fairly consistent. I would argue that the implementation of e-filing ideally would give us productivity gains, but more generally, it's for the convenience of litigants and for attorneys, especially in a place like Wyoming, where we are rural and it is a long way between courts. So, I mean, ideally that would happen, but we haven't seen that in reality. Generally, most courts nationwide have not seen a decrease in the staffing. And again, I think that just has something to do with the nature of the job and how it's changed and how much more we ask of them than we did, say, 10 years ago.
Madam Co-Chair.
Mhm.
I do have a question on the positions that you're adding, the 9 new positions to the circuit courts, and I see Laramie County has 4. And I'm curious, how many staff members does Natrona County have in their circuit court as compared to Laramie Court? Why the discrepancy and why all of a sudden 4 for Laramie County?
Ms. Butler.
Madam Chairwoman, let me just pull up my numbers here. Mr. Co-Chair, so Natrona County currently has 16 positions, 16 clerk positions in that court. Laramie County has 12. So there is a discrepancy there. What we found, and I'll go into this process a little bit with the workload studies. So the legislature appropriated money to the Wyoming Judicial Branch during the last biennium to do a new workload study in the circuit courts. And so the purpose of that is historically this body has relied on the workload study to determine what the workload is both for the circuit courts and the district courts. At the circuit court level, we look at the need for both the judges and for the clerks. And so we contracted with the National Center for State Courts. They came in. We did a time study, which means that every clerk and every circuit court clerk and every circuit court judge in the state tracked every minute of their time for 2 months. And then that time was statistically analyzed to determine a case weight. So each case type has a case weight, the number of minutes it takes to process that case, both as a judge and as a clerk. And then we take those case weights and we plug in our annual number of filings, and that's how we come to the workload for each court. What we found when we did this most recent workload study is that Laramie County is in the most need, and that's why we allocated 4 positions there. And the allocation is based entirely on how that workload study determined the need and where those needs were.
So
And-
just to follow up, so that's how Natrona County ended up with 16 versus 12 because a prior caseload study gave them a higher rating, essentially.
Madam Chairwoman, Mr. Co-Chair, that's correct.
That's what I want to understand.
With that, Ms. Butler, we are scheduled for a break right now and sensing that the committee is getting a little restless here for the morning. Just want to ask about how much longer do you think you need to complete your portion? I see we have members of the district court here for their 10:30 agenda item, and so we can make some flexible adjustments as necessary, if it's necessary. But just wanted to hear from you about how much longer you think you may need.
Madam Chairwoman, the district court budget is very minimal. There are no exception requests within that budget, and I will be presenting that budget. And so I anticipate there will be not much time that we need to spend unless there are some substantial questions in that area. For the rest of the budget, we do have a number of exception requests still to discuss. So
So with that, Ms. Butler, and for the committee's knowledge and for the public who is here listening, we will take our break right now. We will come back at 10:35. We will go to the district courts. We've heard that that will be a short presentation, answer questions about that, and return back to page SC 32. And that way we can dispose of the district court agenda item complete. And then because there's an hour set for the district courts, which will not be needed, we will replace that with the continuation of the Supreme Court's presentation. So with that, we'll go on break until 10:35. Hello, how are you doing? Glad you're here. All right. Order at 10:35. Do we have a quorum? Do we have a quorum? We're seeking a quorum. Hmm. Senator Guru, welcome back to the committee. The time is 10:37.
Thanks for making a quorum. Thanks for coming down. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Representative Walters has arrived. We can now proceed. All right.
Way to go, pork chop.
All right, we have a quorum. So now we will go ahead and proceed. We, as indicated before we went on break, we'll come back and we'll start with our 10:30 agenda item, which is district courts. We'll move through that agenda item and committee members. That is agency 120 through 142. Ms. Butler is going to go through that for us. And then with the remaining time, we will return back to the Supreme Court's budget, which we left off on page SC 32. But with that, we'll go to the district courts.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. I will present the district court budgets. Judge Catherine Rogers and Judge Joseph Lumel are both present today if the committee has any specific questions. You will find the district court section of the Wyoming Judicial Branch budget book. You will find that each of the district court judges are their own separate agency. There are 26 agencies within the budget book, and that begins on DC 1. On DC 1, you will find a letter from the District Court Budget Committee. The Budget Committee, as I mentioned earlier, is the committee that approves the budget of each of the district court judges throughout the state. Generally, the district court budgets encompass the salaries for the judge and 3 staff members, a judicial assistant, a staff attorney or law clerk, and a court reporter. The budget also includes funds for various operating costs for the courts. So obviously, you know what the judge does. The law clerk and staff attorney provides legal help and support to the judges, does the legal research, helps to write decisions, and provide any other support that the judge needs while sitting on the bench or thereafter. For instance, if you're writing an order for summary judgment, your law clerk or staff attorney would do a fair amount of that research. Many of the staff attorneys also act as circuit court magistrates and can be district court commissioners. So they can fill in for different duties for the circuit court judges and the district court judges, depending on what they're looking at and what the need is. The judicial assistant is really the person who is like the traffic director within the judges' chambers. They do a ton of work for the judge in terms of scheduling. So they schedule all the hearings for the judges, make sure that they have all of the litigants, all of the witnesses that are needed for those hearings. They also, similar to the circuit court clerks, are the ones responsible for setting up remote hearings when necessary, and they assist the judge in various orders, so notices of setting and those kinds of things. The court reporter clearly is the person who keeps the transcript of the court proceedings, and so the court reporter sits in the courtroom and transcribes what's going on for the court. The district courts are courts of record, and the court reporters keep those records. There are no exception requests in any of the district court budgets, and the total combined standard budget is just under $33 million. Madam Chairwoman, all of the district court budgets are very, very similar in nature. If you would like me to step through each one of them, I can. Or if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those, as would Judge Rogers and Judge Blumel.
Madam Chair,
Co-chairman?
this is normal. This is the normal place where I'd like to take 1/3 of the Judge Sharp's budget and give that to Judge Catherine Rogers because she works harder than he does.
Oh. Further questions from the committee on the district court budgets? Chief Justice?
Madam Chair, thank you. If there are no other questions, I'd just like to add, there will be a 27th district court judge. If you recall, last time around, you authorized 3 new positions. 2 of those have been filled, one in Natrona County and one in Evanston. The 3rd position has not been filled because it was for the 6th Judicial District. We've been waiting for that courtroom to be completed in Gillette. It is scheduled to be done here any day now, and I'll be writing the letter that the statute requires, certifying that those facilities are now ready and asking for the funding for that 27th position with the 4th judge in Campbell County. Just FYI.
Representative Larson?
I'm anticipating that you'll make that request for this budget session.
Madam Chair, Representative Larson, that's correct.
Okay, okay, great. You'll do a letter then, probably.
Madam Chair, Representative Larson, I will do a letter, and I believe that the co-chairs of Joint Judiciary will be submitting that bill.
Okay, thank you.
All right, further questions from the committee before we go back? All right, Senator Guru? Nope, no questions. So with that, our agenda item for district courts, item number 15 today, is closed. And we'll come back to the Supreme Court, and we're on page SC 32.
Madam Chairwoman, I think we have covered the changes in the position of circuit court clerk and why it's needed. And so on SC 32, I will just run you through how we have allocated those positions within the budget. One thing I would like to let you know is by the time we get these positions, which we anticipate would be July 1st of 2024, that will be time for us to do an updated annual workload study. So we have the same case weights, but then we plug in annual numbers every year to determine what the workload is annually. And so those allocations could potentially change based on if there are changes in that workload since last year. I don't anticipate there will be a substantial change, but I just wanted to alert you to that fact. So what you'll see on SC 32 is a table of how those positions have been allocated. As you see in Judicial District 1, which is Laramie County, 4 positions are allocated in that budget, and that's on page SC 40. In Judicial District 2, 2 positions have been allocated in that budget, and that encompasses Albany County and Carbon County, and we would allocate probably 1 position to each of those as it stands today. In Judicial District 4, which encompasses Johnson County and Sheridan County, there is 1 position, and that is on SC 49. In the 6th Judicial District, which is Campbell, Crook, and Weston counties, 1 added position, and that is on page SC 55. And in the 7th Judicial District, which is Natrona County, 1 additional position, and that is on SC 58.
All right, please, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question here is, in these tables and these requests, it doesn't appear that there's any support costs such as computers, softwares, desks, chairs, those sorts of expenses. Was that an oversight or was that intentional that will be covered some other way within their budget?
Madam Chairman, Representative Walters. So generally, furniture and things of that nature are covered by the county. They're required to provide those things. As far as the computers go, those would be part of our IT budget, the JSA funds. We do have a few support costs in there. You might notice that a couple of the positions are slightly higher, and that is for telecommunications. So in those courts where we are paying for phone service and the county is not absorbing it, we have included costs for that.
How often are you replacing your computers?
Madam Chairwoman, historically, not often, which is a problem. But we are starting a 5-year replacement cycle for our computers.
And when you refer to it as a cycle, are you going to replace them all at one time or portions at a time?
Madam Chair, I think, I don't know the exact plan, but my understanding is that it will be over time. So, you know, we'll begin to replace probably the next summer. And we'll continue that cycle until we have all of them replaced, and then we will start over again in about 5 years.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? All right.
Madam Chairwoman, moving on to SC 33, this is the Common Jury Fund Unit. This encompasses the costs for juries in our circuit courts throughout the state. Constitutionally, we are required to provide a jury of your peers in certain cases. We call a panel of at least 25 jurors if necessary, and sometimes that is necessary. The pay for jurors is $30 a day plus travel if they live more than 5 miles from the court. The standard budget for this unit is $135,210, and we are not asking for any exception requests. Moving on to SC 35, which is the equipment unit within the circuit courts. We have an exception request here for the replacement of copiers. What you will find, so this unit covers all of copiers and postage meters generally within the circuit courts throughout the state. You will notice an anomaly here in that we also have encompassed district courts and the Supreme Court replacement of copiers in this budget. The reason for that is just for ease of use so that we don't put these in each of the budgets. If these funds are received, then that money will be allocated out to those specific agencies to spend for copiers. And so we have a number of copiers that we are requesting funding for, 22 to be exact. There are a few in our circuit courts, and mostly what we've tried to do is, again, ensure that the copiers are functioning, first of all, and then looking at the age of those and how they are functioning in the courts when we look to replace. So we have a number in the circuit courts, also some in the district courts, and then one in the Supreme Court, which is used for many different things, which accounts for the higher cost. It's not your everyday copier. So the total exception budget request for this is $181,500. And the total standard and exception budget request is just over $233,000 for this unit. Also, Madam Chair, this is a one-time cost, not an ongoing cost.
Do you want to say that one more time?
Madam Chairwoman, Co-Chair Nicholas, I believe we will break it up.
But someone wants to ask if there's benefits to bulk buying. So will you be buying 22 copiers all at once to save on costs?
Madam Chair,
The price of 22?
what was that? We generally use the office shop, who is the state's contracted vendor for copiers, and they always give us a very good deal. But my plan is, if we've got a bulk of them that we'll try to purchase at one time, we will talk to them about a bulk purchase discount, but they are already giving us some pretty good prices. Right.
Just to really just belabor the copy machine. This is a copy scanner printer combo, I'm assuming, right?
Madam Chair, that's correct.
All right. Senator Anderson?
Madam Chair, I wanted to compliment the group on getting that picture of Senator Nethcott using the equipment.
It is completely accurate. Completely accurate.
Madam Chairwoman, moving on to SC 37, so the next unit, this is our examination of courts unit. This is the function of auditing of the circuit courts throughout the state. So we employ 2 employees out of this unit. One is our auditor and one is our senior accounting analyst. And both of them provide substantial fiscal support and auditing services to the circuit courts throughout the state. We are also working on a new and improved audit process within the circuit courts to ensure that we are touching them and seeing them more often than we have in the past, and make sure that the funds are being spent or being allocated to the correct location.
Senator Anderson? Question?
Madam,
Are they required to go through training through the Department of Audit as all of the other?
Madam Chairwoman, they are not, but they do get a lot of training. We have two chief clerk conferences every year, and we provide fiscal training at each one of those. And then we also do additional training, when we're providing them with help desk support. Part of our audit process, not the formal audit process, but we keep our eyes on the financial statements within each of the courts monthly.
All right, please proceed.
Madam Chair, the remaining 9 units are the 9 judicial districts within the circuit courts. With your permission, I may just go through those that have additional exception requests that are not accounted for in the position exception requests. So beginning on SC 43, you will find the first exception request. You will also see an exception request here. This is Judicial District 2. So you'll also see an exception request for 2 positions. But the additional request is for money for interpreters. And this is in Carbon County and the Carbon County Circuit Court. What we have found is in that county, our budget for interpreters is consistently exhausted. We see a lot of interpretation services needed and also some languages that are really uncommon. When we have uncommon languages, it tends to cost us quite a bit more to employ those interpreters. And so we are making an exception request here for $5,000 in that budget to ensure that we can cover the cost of those interpreters. Madam Chair, the next exception request is on SC 61. And this is a fairly small one. This is in the 8th Judicial District, which covers Converse, Goshen, Niobrara, and Platte counties. And really, this is just a telecommunications request. The costs of telecommunications have gone up. And so we're requesting an exception request in the amount of $2,490.
This would be former Secretary of State Ed Buchanan's office. Colleagues.
Madam Chair, he is in the district court. This would be in the circuit court budget, but yes, same location.
Thank you.
And then the final exception request within the circuit courts is on page SC 64. Again, we see a need for interpreters in Teton County in particular, and we have seen this grow substantially over the last biennium. Last biennium, Teton County spent $3,000 on interpreters for the entire biennium. As of today, we have spent $15,000 on interpreters in Teton County. And so the need has gone up substantially. We're requesting $12,000 for that budget in Teton County.
Special money for Teton County is being asked.
So, Madam Co-Chair, when I was speaking with the circuit court judge up there, he said almost 30 to 40% of their hearings are done in Spanish. And it is just kind of rather remarkable. So we probably ought to, when we replace that position, require the next circuit court judge to be bilingual.
We'll talk about it. All right. Please proceed, Ms. Butler.
Madam Chairwoman, and one more, I failed to mention this one. There's also a telecommunications cost increase in Teton County in the amount of $1,883. So the total exception budget request for Judicial District 9 in the circuit courts is $13,883.
Representative.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, that's correct. Madam Chairwoman, that completes the circuit court division. If there are no other questions, I will move on.
Please do.
The court technology division of the judicial branch budget begins on SC 66. There are two units within this budget, the court technology unit, which is a general fund unit, and the judicial systems automation unit, which is a special revenue fund unit. So those two funding sources support technology advances for the entire branch. It includes personnel costs for 11 IT staff and 8 software application staff. It also includes costs related to cybersecurity, internet, technology equipment, network, cloud storage, and all of our software applications, as well as courtroom technology and any licensing costs for the technology. Some of the successes that we've seen over the last biennium, I think you've heard this before, but remote hearings are very popular, provide a big convenience for the citizens and attorneys in the state. We continue those remote hearings. We have fully implemented the updated case management system in all of the trial courts throughout the state. So Chancery Court, Circuit Court, and District Courts are all complete. We have fully implemented the jury management system in all trial courts that have juries. So that is the exception of Chancery Courts, which does not hold jury trials. We have begun implementation of e-filing in the district courts and have fully implemented e-filing in the Chancery Court, which is a fully electronic court. In the district courts, we are nearly halfway through the implementation of e-filing. And as you heard from the chief earlier today, we will finish that implementation by the end of 2024. And we will begin, we are slated to begin piloting e-filing in the circuit courts at the beginning of 2025. Substantial progress has been made in hardening the judicial branch network and continuing that work. High-level maintenance of courtroom technology continues to ensure that we can continue remote hearings. So the court technology unit begins on SC 68. This unit, which again is a general fund unit, funds some of the day-to-day operations of technology, mostly internet, and then 3 employees. The standard budget for this unit is $2.6 million. We do have an exception request, and again, that begins on SC 68. That exception request really is designed to shift the funding of some of the court technology costs to the general fund. The reason for that is we do have a special revenue fund that has essentially subsumed the bulk of our technology costs for the branch. And what we are seeing is that account, that special revenue account, is beginning to dwindle. That JSA account pays for the rest of our staff in our IT and software applications divisions, as well as a number of other products. So what we're looking at doing within the court technology unit with general funds is shifting the kind of infrastructure costs to the general fund, similar to how the legislature funds ETS. So those would be things like cybersecurity, costs related to the network, licensing costs, some of the day-to-day applications like Microsoft and the Microsoft Cloud. All of those things would shift to the court technology unit rather than being funded out of the special revenue account. In budget fiscal year 21, the judicial branch sought an additional $1.8 million to address some of the needs that we have, and that exception request was denied, and those funds continue to come out of the JSA. So these are things that we use to keep the lights on, essentially, within our court technology throughout the branch. So they have to be paid for some way, where they are infrastructure costs. The total exception budget request for this unit is just over 1.5 million, and that would put the total standard and exception budget request at just over $4 million per biennium.
Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none.
Madam Chairwoman, beginning on SC 71, you will find the Judicial Systems Automation Unit within the Court Technology Division. As I said, this is a special revenue fund. These are additional funds that are part of fees attached to civil filings and criminal cases. Originally, the JSA fee was imposed at $10 for those fees. The fee was increased to $25 in 2017 and $40 in 2020. The impact of inflation basically has shown that the increase in costs continues in all of the areas of technology. So that includes software and hardware technology equipment. The JSA fee was originally intended to cover court automation costs. So really it was designed to get us to e-filing and to pay for that system. In 2018, it was expanded to cover courtroom technology. So all of the things in the courtrooms throughout the state that allow us to do remote hearings, that fund was statutorily expanded to cover those things. As of today, it covers the vast majority of our technology costs. What you will see on SC 72 is just a little chart that shows you the inflows and outflows per biennium within that JSA fund balance. The JSA account brings in about $6.3 million per biennium. It currently has a balance of $9.5 million. Projected revenues and costs indicate that beginning in this upcoming biennium, we will outspend our revenue by nearly $2 million. We update our 10-year technology budget projections annually. So we have done this for a number of years. Last biennium, I indicated to you when I came to you that we would likely run out of money in that account by budget fiscal year 27. Thanks to some really great work by our IT division, we have extended that out and looked at our courtroom technology replacement. So as of now, we're looking at, with these projections, we're looking at that fund being exhausted in either budget fiscal year 31 or 33. Those are all based on assumptions that the revenue will increase by 2% a year. In reality, what we have seen is a 5% downward trend. And so those projections may not be, we may be running out of money sooner than we anticipate if we continue to see that downward trend. The exception request for spending authority is $2.1 million. Again, this is a special revenue fund, so there are no general fund dollars attached to that. That exception request for spending authority is designed to help with the technology equipment replacement. So the hardware that we just talked about, we're beginning a 5-year replacement cycle for our computers. And then we're starting to do a courtroom technology refresh on a 10-year cycle. So we'll start doing 7 courts a year beginning in 25, so we can make sure that that technology continues to operate for our courts throughout the state.
Ms. Butler, quick question. You said we're on a 5% downward trend. That's for the JSA account balance?
Madam Chairwoman, that's correct.
And so why do we believe that that's occurring?
Madam Chairwoman, I think there's a number of things. As Chief Justice Fox mentioned earlier, our filings haven't gone up. And so, that fee is attached to the number of filings. We've seen a decrease in citations. And those fees are assessed on citations. So it's just based purely on the number of filings that we're seeing in our courts.
Madam Chairman.
Representative Stith?
Ms. Butler, I just have a question comparing your table, page SC 70, with, okay, no, I see my error. I withdraw the question.
So how, Ms. Butler, if you know, how much of that 5% is based on citation reductions?
Madam Chairwoman, I don't know that off the top of my head, but we can find those numbers.
Do you believe that's directly correlated to the unfilled vacancies within the highway patrol?
Madam Chairwoman, we do generally see a decrease in citations when there are vacancies within Highway Patrol.
What we pay for in other ways. Please proceed, Ms. Butler.
Madam Chairwoman, if there are no further questions, that completes the Court Technology Division. Moving on to SC 74. This is the Judicial Retirement Division. This judicial retirement is a
1 second. To follow up on like this type of issue, has the Judiciary Committee taken this as an interim topic to come up with other alternatives for financing?
Madam Chairman, Co-Chair Nicholas, not since I have been in this position.
When I was on the Judiciary Committee, we raised the fees twice. Noted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, on SC 75, you will find, or SC 74 onto SC 75, you will find the Judicial Retirement Unit. This unit covers two separate things. One is retirement for judges. Prior to the current plan, judges could opt into an old judicial retirement plan. That plan is no longer available to judges who were appointed after a certain date. And so that judicial retirement plan continues to dwindle, and at some point it will go away. The other piece of this unit that this funding covers is currently we have $50,000 in this unit to cover the cost of retired judges who fill in for current judges. So when a judge is going on vacation, or when a judge has an illness or a substantial illness or maybe a surgery, we ask retired judges to come in and fill their seat while they are out. And so that $50,000 encompasses that. What we have seen over the last biennium as we've worked with the Judicial Innovation Task Force is that our judges are becoming exhausted. Their jobs are incredibly difficult. They see some not great things every day, and they need time off to ensure their own well-being, and that well-being helps them be better judges. So we have started to encourage our judges to take that time, and as a result, we have asked retired judges to fill in when necessary. We've done it for vacations. We've also done it for surgeries and substantial illnesses. So these are funds that that continue to assist our judiciary in doing their jobs. The exception request you see on SC 75 is related to that. So this would be an additional $75,000 to allow for retired judges, also district court commissioners and circuit court magistrates, to fill in for a judge when necessary.
Representative Larson?
Thank you. Claire, I'm trying to figure out why that's in the judicial retirement. I'm not understanding what $75,000 to pay for salaries. I'm trying to make the tie there, so just.
Ms. Smith?
Madam Chairman, Representative Larson, putting that money in this unit predates me, so I'm not sure what the original logic was. We've put our request in this unit simply because we already have that $50,000 for this type of thing, so it fit there. Ideally, excuse me, Madam Chairman, Representative Larson, ideally, we would move this to branch-wide resources, and we have discussed that if whether this exception request is filled or not, that separate pot of funds goes to branch-wide resources. It is more logical there.
Co-Chairman?
In Unit 0901, which is branch-wide resources.
So Don, in order for that to happen, do we just direct them to do it or ask them to do it, or they can just do it?
They can just do it.
You can address that in markup and just move the funds.
Would you make a note of that? And we'll just do it. Thank you.
Senator Salazar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That 75,000 seems awfully low. Is that taking care of what you need on an annual basis, or?
Madam Chairwoman, I think this is maybe the first biennium in quite some time when we are slated to use up the $50,000 that currently exists. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we really have encouraged judges to take advantage of this, and they are beginning to. I would say for the next biennium, it's probably sufficient, but thereafter, we could need more.
Madam Chairman.
Senator Anderson?
Madam Chairman, is there a age certain that we retire judges, or are they not limited?
Madam Chair, Senator Anderson, for district court judges and Supreme Court justices, the Constitution provides retirement at 70. That does not apply to circuit court judges.
Representative Zwanitzer? All right, please proceed.
Madam Chairwoman, you'll see on SC 76, the total exception budget request for this unit is $75,000, and the total standard and exception budget request is 1.8 million.
Representative Walters?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A question on the table itself on page 77. It's showing 14 judges. And the previous one showed about that many, and now in your narrative, it says 2 have passed. So in the table, are we overstating the number of judges, or where am I confused?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Walters, you are not confused. On the C sheet on page SC 74, you will see the accurate numbers. So the standard budget should be 12 on both the C sheet and on SC 77. So that was simply an oversight by us.
All right, SC 79?
Madam Chairwoman, moving on from the Judicial Retirement Division, the Treatment Court Division begins on SC 78. This is a new unit within the judicial branch budget. And again, that is because the treatment program as of July 1st, 2024 will transition from the Department of Health to the judicial branch. The budget that you see here is the budget that currently exists within the Department of Health for the treatment court program. And so that will transition to our budget, as I said, July 1st, 2024. The standard budget request for this unit is $6.9 million. Madam Chair, moving on to SC 81.
Representative Larson?
So has that shift taken place yet, or does it take place in July? I guess my question is, do you have funding in the current fiscal year to cover it if not?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, that shift will happen July 1st.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, the next division is,
Representative Stitt?
Madam Chairman, Ms. Butler, on page SC 80 for the treatment court, it's my understanding what you're saying is that these numbers are just brought over from the Department of Health. Is that right? Maybe it's just a matter of arithmetic. On standard budget column 2, the expenditure totals are 6.927 million. But the numbers that are above them don't add up to that. So is there something in the way it's translated over from Department of Health that explains that?
Lawyers challenging lawyers on arithmetic. This will be a fun exercise.
Madam Chairman, Representative Stith, I'd take the blame for that one. I have the 600 series, which is grants, is not showing on this page, and that's what the difference is. So I apologize, that was an oversight.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, the next division is branch-wide resources, which begins on SC 81. Branch-wide resources, this unit covers costs that are associated with the entire branch, as the name indicates. Judicial education falls under this unit, drug court magistrates, payouts for sick and annual leave when a court budget is unable to cover the entire costs. The exception requests that you see in this unit reflect additional resources for the branch and enhanced services that will ultimately benefit the citizens of Wyoming, but also benefit the branch as a whole. The first exception request on page SC 82 is employee compensation. We've talked about this a bit already today. Over the last biennium, what our team has done in the administrative office is we have worked to create judicial branch pay tables for our personnel. Prior to that, historically, we have never had judicial branch pay tables. And so what has happened is when there is a raise for employee compensation, when the legislature says we're going to give all state employees a raise, we take a percentage of what the executive branch does. So in other words, the idea is that if the average percent increase for employee compensation on the executive branch side is 6%, then we would do some similar math, and the idea is that the judicial branch would receive a 6% increase as well. And so that's how we've received employee compensation over the last few years. Now that we have judicial branch pay tables, we can better evaluate where our employees sit in comparison to market. And what we have found is that we were substantially behind. And we continue to lag behind the executive branch. What that means is a couple of different things. We have heard pretty consistently when we do things like exit interviews that compensation is an issue for a number of our employees throughout the state. Turnover is costly, as you know, and so whenever we have to bring in a new employee because somebody leaves, it actually probably costs us more than it would to pay that employee market or above, not above market. Apologies for that. So that's one issue. The other thing is just the fact that we are lagging so behind the executive branch. So the executive branch on average sits at 94% of market. We on average sit at 84% of market. Our lowest paid employees sit at 81.5% of market, which is just above minimum of market. And that is with the raises for the last 2 years. So that just indicates how far behind many of our employees were when you all started with employee compensation. I would say what we have seen with the employee compensation over the last 2 years is it has helped in turnover. We still have too much, but it has helped. And our employees are very appreciative of those extra dollars that they have in their paychecks every month. But where we want to get to is a point where we are paying them a fair wage in comparison to market. So that first exception request, which begins on SC 82 and extends onto SC 83, the total request is $5.4 million. On SC 83, you will see a breakout of where we're at in percentage of market. So as I said, our lowest paid employees are at 81.5% of market, and the majority of our employees sit right there. We have 44 employees.
Chairman?
So, Alyssa, could you provide us with what you just said, your pay tables? So we can kind of do an eyeball to eyeball pay table with the executive branch. And just so you know, I've asked A&I to kind of do the same thing on a position by position basis both in terms of, because, you used the Hague group, but you didn't have them conduct the analysis. So I've asked them to conduct that same analysis that they do for state employees and marry up those numbers, what they come up with what you're asking for. And I just tell you that because I've asked for it. And so when we get it, we'll show it to you. So, and if there are discrepancies, we can talk about them when we see them. But I'd like to see where your positions are at 84% versus, so I can actually see the number.
Madam Chairwoman and Co-Chair Nicholas, we can get you that information. We did provide a handout to you all on the classification structure and kind of where our positions sit, how they're classified and the pay range associated with those positions. So you should have that in your materials. If you do not, please let us know and we'll make sure that we get it to you. If there's additional resources that you need, that if that doesn't cover what you need, we'd be happy to get you additional information.
Representative Larson?
So as I read this morning, it was interesting, but it didn't tell me how you got there. What did you use as a basis for determining that so I made the assumption you went to A&I and says, how do you do it over here? And it doesn't tell us in here how many you have in each position and where they're at in that pay range.
So that's what we want is a breakdown of each position.
Senator Salazar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know you had the 16% increase over the 24 months. And I know that some of that went to the lowest salaried individuals. This then is the request to bring it up to the executive level. Can you fill me in on how far we are before we get to that executive level that you're searching for?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Salazar, that's what the amount of the request is the exception request. Where we sit today on average, that's not across the board. So on average, which means, accounting for the lowest and the highest paid employees in our branch, we're at an average of 84%.
Okay.
Obviously, some are lower, some are higher. And we would like to get to where the executive branch is, and they are at on average 94%. And so to get to that point, that's that $5.4 million exception request that you'll see in your book.
Madam Chair.
Mhm.
So even with that 16%, you were still behind?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Salazar, that is correct.
Madam Chair, at the risk of being a lawyer doing math, we started out behind. And so when everybody got, say, a 6% increase, that actually put us more behind, right? Because 6% of less. So not that those raises weren't appreciated, but they didn't get us to any kind of parity.
Further questions?
Madam Chairwoman, and just to give the committee an idea of how we went through this process. So over the last 2 years, we have 2 employees within our administrative office who have been certified in the Hay methodology. So they did the initial evaluations of the jobs in order to classify those positions. And we did that based on job descriptions and talking with the supervisors and the staff themselves on whether or not those job descriptions were accurate. After we performed that initial analysis, we did talk with A&I, HRD, about whether or not our classification seemed correct, seemed on par with what they would expect. And generally, the answer was yes. As far as the pay, the range of pay, we actually use the executive branch range. So the range that they use for their classified positions, we are using the exact same dollar numbers as the executive branch. So I just wanted to make sure that the committee had a good understanding of how that process went. It was a long process, but we did collaborate with HRD pretty substantially as we went through that.
So listen, my understanding is you went through that process, but you did not show or ask A&I to do that computation themselves or to review it. When you just took the components and you put the pieces together at the final end. That's what A&I told me. So I've just asked them to go back and run and perform that task.
Ms. Smith?
Madam Chairman, Representative Nicholas, one of the things that we did do with HRD is we picked roughly half of our jobs and talked through them with them, talked through the description. We started with circuit court clerks because we have more of those than anything else. And so we talked through what those jobs are and made sure that they would have graded them the same way that we did. So it was a little bit more extensive than what you just described. We did have some pretty in-depth conversations on job responsibilities.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
It's all moot because the co-chairman has asked for the report to be done, so I guess we'll have that data and then you can, counter it. So with that, anything further on this topic? Representative Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to make sure I understand correctly. So what is the bogey? How much is the difference that we need to budget for to bring you up to parity? And
Let's go
then
back
is
to
that the ongoing average?
one.
Or am I asking the same question?
That's not $5 million.
At 5 million
At
total
5.8. First page on our sheet.
for 2 years? Okay. Thank you.
All right, the time is 11:28. Or we go back to the beginning and start all over. Any final comments, Ms. Butler?
Madam Chair, not on that exception request.
All right, anything final?
Madam Chair, we have a few more exception requests within our branch-wide resources unit. The second one is an employee assistant program. So this is an EAP to provide mental and well-being services, health services to our employees throughout the state and our judges. What we have seen nationwide and with our own judges is that, as I mentioned before, the job is incredibly stressful. Our judges see terrible things, as do their court reporters, law clerks, judicial assistants, and circuit court clerks. This EAP is a service that we would provide, that a contractor would provide to our personnel for mental health and well-being. We did request a quote from the same EAP that the executive branch uses currently, and that came back at $24,000. So that is the request for the exception on page SC 83.
Representative Larson?
If that, kind of some conversation we had yesterday, so it's not an existing contract, you're just using that for the basis to fund, but you'd send out an RFP and solicit it, right?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, that's correct. This is an estimate of how much that would cost based on initial investigation.
Any other exception requests?
Madam Chairwoman, yes. The next exception request is pooled interpreter funds. I will try to be very quick. The pooled interpreter funds would be an alternate way to fund interpreters throughout the state. In some of our courts, when we have uncommon languages or they use interpreters a lot, they can exhaust their operating budget, but it doesn't happen consistently. So in those locations where it does happen consistently, we have asked for additional money, for instance, in Carbon County and Teton County. But in other locations, you could have a week-long jury trial in the district court and the language is Hmong. And so that will entirely exhaust their operating costs. And so this is just a method to shore up the interpreter funding that we need throughout the state. And instead of putting it in particular budgets where it may not be used, it is a pooled fund where people can, or courts can tap into if they run out of funds in their own budget. The exception request is for $30,000.
Questions on that exception request?
The next exception request is for education, conferences, and travel. One of the things that we have recognized is that we need to provide better education to all of our personnel throughout the state. What we have done over the last few years to move toward that is we've actually created an education division within the administrative office of the courts. That division is currently growing and something that we need to shore up over time. What we have seen is as we've provided additional education It costs more money for things like travel for our staff to go out and see the circuit courts and train them in their courts. It also costs money for the circuit courts to come to locations and be trained. That includes new clerks and ongoing training for existing clerks and chief clerks. This also pays for the learning management system, which I mentioned earlier, and that provides on-demand online training for personnel throughout the state. So the total request for this exception is $175,720. Madam Chair, one more. The last exception request is for judicial officer security. And so obviously what we've seen and maybe what you all have heard in the news is that the security for our judges has become ever more important. And one of the ways that we can assist with that is to provide a service or a contracted service that will scrub their personal data off of the internet. It is a long and arduous process to do that. The judges don't necessarily have the expertise to do that, nor the time, and our staff does not have the time to do that initially and then maintain it over the years. And so the request here is for $24,000, and that would be, again, based on our initial investigations, that would cover the cost of contracting with a service to do that data scrubbing for our judges to ensure that their personal information is not readily available on the internet. Madam Chairwoman, the total exception budget request for this unit is $5.6 million, and the total standard and exception budget request is $6.2 million.
All right, questions on SC 83 and SC 84? Ms. Butler, I'm going to circle us back to the beginning of the book, to Romanet 7. And so this is the summary of branch exception requests from the general fund requests. So can you explain to us why all of those that you just went through for the last couple of hours are not listed here in 1 through 16? What's the difference? Can you explain the difference between why some of those exception requests aren't on this summary?
Madam Chairwoman, I believe they should be. If they are not, we have missed something.
They are all there.
Yes,
Right.
Madam Chairwoman.
Okay. So back to the question that Representative Henderson was asking for the employee compensation to match to get up to the 94% with the executive branch. That's priority number 1, correct, on that chart?
Madam Chairwoman, that is correct.
And so the branch is stating that they need $5.4 million on a biennium to get the branch on par with the executive branch, correct?
Madam Chairwoman, that's correct.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions from the committee? Any final comments?
Madam Chairwoman, I just want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you for your consideration. We very much appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, this budget and these exception requests really are geared toward ensuring that we can adapt and move into the future as a branch, but it's also a way for us to play catch up, not only when it comes to employee compensation, but in the services that we provide to the courts and to the citizens of Wyoming. So we appreciate your time and consideration and all you do in your service. And if there are no other questions, I would say thank you.
Just one more for clarity on that Romanet 7 page, the 16 priorities for the exception request, are those in order of priority?
Madam Chairwoman, they are.
All right, thank you. Mr. Richards?
Madam Chairman, just for knowledge of the committee, so there's no surprises during your markup, we will bring to your attention the continuation of footnote number 4. This is an unusual practice for an agency, but the salaries of the judges either need statutory approval, which it does not, or budget footnote approval, which it does in this case. So that continuation, staff will flag that for your benefit.
And that reminds me, does the Chancery Court dollars roll over and not revert? For anything that has been expended or not expended?
Ms. Butler, do you know?
Madam Chairwoman, Co-Chair Nicholas, yeah, if they're not spent, my understanding is they would revert, we revert them.
So it would make sense for us not to revert those dollars? And then we'll have that just help cover the cost of next plan.
2025.
Madam Chair.
Senator Kinsky?
Don, did you say which part of it requires legislative authorization for the request? Is it the judges?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairman, Senator Kinsky, that's correct. So there is a statutory provision that allows judge salary increases to occur by footnote in the budget bill. The first time that was exercised was last year. But at some point, the statute itself will need to be changed. And until the statute itself is changed, the footnote becomes a controlling party.
And it, I'm sorry, I missed that question.
We have,
Right, every 2 years. So we're better off a bill. If we're going to do it, we should have a bill.
Yeah, the question is, can you get a bill through with 2/3 vote? So probably better to do it next year. Just in case. You can actually we can do both.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to give a raise that you don't know whether you can honor in the future, is my feeling.
I saw Representative Stith have a furrowed brow when it came to rolling over the Chancery Court Fund. So let's explain that more thoroughly now. My understanding is there's funding for a Chancery Court judge that will revert back. Co-Chairman Nicholas indicated that should roll over as a result of the branch's request and notification that there will be a full-time judge in 25 to fill that role. Is that correct? 24, because it's 23. Representative Stitt.
Madam Chairman, thank you for noting the furrowed brow.
Sure.
I just generally, I just think it's
I watched them.
typically, to me, it's typically cleaner to have everything revert and then we just fund it in the budget. So it just seems cleaner and easier to keep track of.
I'll let you discuss that with your chairman. All right, with that, thank you. Appreciate your time this morning. We are on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we are on our 11:30 agenda item. It is 11:39, but we're good for time. We are with the Board of Law Examiners, and I see Ms. Sharon Wilkinson, the Executive Director of the State Bar. This is Agency 102. And it's also in your packet, in your book. Welcome.
Joining me today is Kathy Benson, Deputy Director and Chief Director of the State Bar. So this is a standard budget request. I am just requesting spending authority for the revenue that's held in our special revenue account. And I'm requesting authority to spend approximately $241,000. And the current balance in the special revenue account is just over $222,000. So Wyoming is one of 33 states where we're what's known as a mandatory state bar. So as the attorneys in the room know, if you want to practice law in Wyoming, you have to be a member of the Wyoming State Bar. There are 3 ways to be admitted to the Wyoming State Bar. So all applicants to the Wyoming State Bar they apply to the Wyoming Supreme Court and pay a $600 application fee. And that's what makes up the revenue in this special revenue fund, is just those $600 application fees. So there are 3 ways to be admitted to the bar. You can be admitted by exam. So that means you sit for the bar exam, take the bar exam, and receive what is a passing score in Wyoming. You can also be admitted on motion, which means that you are authorized to practice law in another jurisdiction, and then you don't have to take our exam. Or Wyoming is one of 41 jurisdictions that were known as a uniform bar exam jurisdiction. And so 41 jurisdictions give the uniform bar exam. So you can also be admitted by taking the uniform bar exam in a UBE jurisdiction. and requesting a transfer of your score. So you can transfer those scores in Wyoming. The rule is you can transfer your score for up to 3 years after receiving a passing score in Wyoming. Keep in mind, no matter how you come in on it, how you are admitted, every applicant to the Wyoming State Bar has to go through the character and fitness process. So they're screened by the National Conference of Bar Examiners. And also we have a character and fitness committee made up of 4 lawyers and 1 non-lawyer that review all the character and fitness. Go through a background check. We look at the debt, all those kinds of things. So some of the things that this money is spent on, obviously we have to purchase the exams from the National Conference of Bar Examiners. So those are some of the expenses. We obviously have to find a venue in order to administer the exam. We do pay a third-party vendor to do the background and the credit checks. Oftentimes, and we're seeing an increase in this, if somebody's background is a little bit questionable, they may be referred to a hearing before the Character and Fitness Committee. We obviously have to pay the cost to have those hearings. We also have to pay the cost for the transcripts and a court reporter before those hearings before the Character and Fitness Committee. Also, the Wyoming Supreme Court reimburses the Wyoming State Bar for the time that our staff spends on admissions issues. We do administer admissions on behalf of the Wyoming Supreme Court. And let's see, what else as far as costs? And then exam costs. So the exams currently, being a uniform bar exam jurisdiction, we do purchase the exams from the National Conference of Bar Exams, and those are running at about $122 per examinee right here, $122 per examinee to give the 3 portions of the exam that's given. Oh, and training and travel. Thank you, Kathy. Madam Chair, also, we do attend the National Conference of Bar Examiners, hosts an annual conference around the 1st of May each year. And that conference is very beneficial. And we take staff, we take members of the Board of Law Examiners, which is made up of 5 lawyers appointed by the Wyoming Supreme Court. We take members of the Board of Law Examiners, members of the Character and Fitness Committee to those conferences. And those conferences have 3 tracks, one for administrators, one for the bar examiners, and then one for the character and fitness folks, just to give us many more resources that we have at our hands in Wyoming. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions on whether or not Representative Stith passed?
He did, Madam Chair.
Representative Larson?
Wilkinson, so on your chart on LE3, just salaries, no salaries in this unit?
Madam Chairman, that is correct, Representative Larson.
And those are taken care of through 900 series or where?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any final questions for the spending authority? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Wilkinson, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We're back on time. All right, committee, we are moving on to Agency 103, Commission on Judicial Conduct and Ethics. We have Executive Director Wendy Soto and the Commission Chairwoman, Karen Meister-Emmerich. Welcome. You just press the button, it'll turn green when the mic is on. There you go. Okay. And if you'd introduce yourself to the committee, and you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Thank you. Commissioner Nethercott, Chairman Nicholas, and members of the committee. My name is Karen Meister-Emmerich, and I am the chairman of the Commission on Judicial Conduct and Ethics. With me today is Wendy Soto, the commission's executive director. And I don't believe we have any other.
You want to pull that mic a little closer.
I don't believe we have any other commissioners in the room. As many of you know, this is a 12-member volunteer commission consisting of 3 judges, 3 attorneys, and 6 laypersons. The commission has performed its work for many years without making any exception requests. In fact, like other agencies, it has sustained several budget reductions. The commission is a responsible, conservative steward of the taxpayers' money and operates efficiently within its small budget. This year, the commission budget request for the biennium is for a total of $367,641. Included in that amount is an exception request of $1,457, simply for the purpose of replacing computer equipment within the replacement cycle of ETS. The commission is a vital part of the integrity of the Wyoming judicial system, providing an avenue for citizens to seek relief and independent review if they believe a judge has acted in an unethical way. Wyoming judicial officers include about 60 full-time state judges and about 100 part-time magistrates and municipal court judges. Adequate funding is needed to protect the rights of citizens and allow the commission to fully investigate allegations of unethical behavior on the part of judicial officers, to bring charges against those officers if appropriate, and to prevent delay of disciplinary proceedings in order to fulfill the commission's constitutionally mandated mission. As we have explained in the past, the workload of the commission is unpredictable. It is impossible to anticipate how many cases will be filed, how many will need to be investigated, and if cases will be significant and complex, requiring more time and expenses, including more money for attorneys' fees and the cost of adjudicating cases. Unlike some states, we do not have legal counsel on staff. The commission has always negotiated reduced attorney hourly rate, and Wyoming lawyers are willing to do this work at a reduced rate because they recognize the importance of the work. Also notable are the many hours of professional services the volunteer commissioners donate to the process. I want to emphasize that my experience on the commission has shown that Wyoming citizens are fortunate to have a judiciary that is of the highest quality. Through my experience as a member of the commission, which includes information about disciplinary issues in other states, I have learned about the type of ethics cases in other jurisdictions. I am pleased to report that we do not have many of the more egregious types of cases that other states do. This is largely due to our system of appointing judges on a merit-based system and the quality of judges who are appointed to serve in Wyoming. But the lack of serious infractions is also due to the work of the commission and its ability to perform its function with adequate funding. At this point, I will turn our budget presentation over to our Executive Director, Ms. Soto.
Welcome, Ms. Soto.
Madam Chair, Co-Chair Nicholas, good morning. So my presentation is very much like our budget. It's short and simple. Excuse me. As you know, the Commission's budget covers the typical expenses of operating a small office. That includes personnel, travel for meetings and training, technology and office expenses, and the cost of hiring disciplinary counsel when needed. As Chairman Meister Emmerich mentioned, the Commission has an exception request for the next biennium. This request is for the replacement of one laptop and one monitor, which falls within the replacement schedule of ETS. The request is for $1,457. You can see the detail of the Commission's proposed budget on page 9 in column 5 of the budget book. The request for 25-26 biennium, as Chairman Meister Emmerich mentioned, is $367,641. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions on the laptop? All right, seeing none. Any questions regarding the Judicial Conduct and Ethics Commission? Senator Guru.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Just a comment. Thank you both for being here today. As some of you have been here for a while know that this is one of my departments in my portfolio. And a couple of years ago, I made a very erroneous mistake, which Ms. Soto, I have apologized to her, but I do every year and apologize to her. And so just give Wendy what she wants, will you? Thanks.
Hey, we'll back you up on the floor, okay? We got this.
Madam Chair. Senator Guru, thank you very much for that, and the continued apology. I just want to thank you all for your attention to this and for your consideration.
Thank you. Any final questions? Representative Zwaniter?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just curious if your antiquated printer is still adequate for what your needs are.
It is indeed. We're fine with other equipment and currently we're fine. It's just anticipating replacement in the next biennium of the equipment we have.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here. It's good to see you both. All right. With that, committee, we will break for our 12 o'clock lunch at 11:52. That's the judicial branch.